Good evening, everyone. I'm definitely missing board members, but I do have a quorum. I can get started with the script. We are using Zoom webinar for meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. I will go ahead and confirm member access as a preliminary matter. I'm Dawn Holgate, Chair of the Nantucket Select Board. I'll go through the members first in the order in which I see you. Jason Bridges.
Hi, Dawn, here.
Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
And we're just still missing Melissa. Staff members, we have Erica Mooney.
Present.
Laura Kabadi.
She said she's having mic issues. She says present.
Oh, she's still muted.
She is
I'm
now.
present. I'm present,
Oh, I
Madam
can
Chair.
hear
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Roberto Santamaria.
Present.
Jericho, is it Mealy? No,
It's Mealy.
Mealy. Jericho Mealy. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm glad you can hear me. Libby Gibson.
Present.
David Gray.
Present.
Brian Turbot.
Here.
Rob Branny.
Present.
Jeff Carlson. Jeff, can you hear me okay? Well, he's not on for a while, so he might have stepped away. We also have present Gary Shaw, CEO of the hospital.
Present.
And Carol Pillion, who has a request later on in our agenda. She may have stepped away.
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Carol. Thank
Hi.
you. So good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. I would say the continue state of emergency. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment as previously noted through the Zoom webinar functions. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share the screen of your computer unless you wish to do so. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All meeting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. When we turn to the first item on our agenda, before we do so, let me cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members as they raise their hands, inviting anyone to provide comments. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. And if possible, if you're not on an item for a while, it is actually easier if you turn your camera off. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. Please have remarks go through the chair between members, and each vote will be taken via roll call. This is the December 2nd Select Board meeting. We have one additional announcement added to the agenda. I will say that the real estate items are going to be put off until the 16th of December. So that whole section will not be heard tonight, if anyone's looking for that. And I don't think that there were any other additions or changes. So we'll accept the agenda with those notes, and I will turn announcements over to the town manager.
Thank you. So this meeting is being video and audio recorded, as has been mentioned. We have a traffic direction change coming up. This is pursuant to a board vote from October 21st. The section of Center Street from India to Hussey has been designated one-way northwest bound. So that is heading towards the Jared Coffin House from India Street. The two-way section that's existing between Broad Street and Hussey Street will remain two-way. This change becomes effective on December 8th. That's next Tuesday. So make a note in your travels. We have a committee appointment coming up for a vacancy on the Roads and Right-of-Way Committee next board meeting, next Wednesday, December 9th. The deadline for applications is Friday, December 4th. And our one additional announcement, which we will also make next week, is that there's a free online seminar coming up on December 15th from 9 to noon. It's sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce, the Town of Nantucket, and the Community Foundation of Nantucket. It is free, I think I said. It's called Micro Inequities, Managing Unconscious Bias. The speaker is a Stephen Young, and we encourage people to register to learn more about managing unconscious biases, gain actionable insights on how to address such on both an individual and institutional basis. Master your skills of sending, receiving, and interpreting messages that drive behavior that you might not know you're doing. So you can go to the Chamber website to register. And I believe if Melissa's on, she can say it's right. It's easy to find. It's right on like a homepage.
Yes, you can go to the Chamber of Commerce website and our events link, and we'll be posting about it on social media also.
Excellent. That is it for announcements. Oh, sorry. One last thing. Forgot. Maybe a very important one. We have Jericho Mealy here. He is our new Human Services Director, replacing Taylor Hilst. We are very fortunate that he was able to start as quickly as he is, and he's already hard at work on a number of initiatives. So Jericho, welcome. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I can do
a
quick introduction, I guess. I am Jericho Mealy. I was born here on the island in 1980. I graduated from Nantucket High School in 1996. I went on to study East Asian history and theory of knowledge, epistemology at Brandeis University. For the last 6 years or so, I've worked for the prefecture of Miyagi in Japan as part of an educational outreach program. I was responsible for a variety of different engagement and educational initiatives that were launched as part of their English as a Second Language program. And I have recently got back to Nantucket from Japan in about September. And I'm really looking forward to this job. And I think that's probably about enough for me.
Thank you so much. That was excellent, and welcome. We're very happy to have you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to move on to our COVID-19 weekly update. Are there any opening public comments or board comments before I turn it over to Roberto Santamaria? And I will turn it over for the update. I think there's a lot to update us on tonight.
So yes, there's a lot to update, but I'm not going to do a PowerPoint today. It's just, there's a lot to discuss, and it's a lot easier to take some time to digest what's happening, bring it down to something that we can all, that I can get into into the public's eye in a way that is understandable and and honestly, that doesn't cause panic, because it's something that we did expect. Today we registered 46 cases from the last 2 days. And one of the things that's really important to understand is that this is the very first part of the spike of travel related to Thanksgiving. So one of the most important parts that I would like to express to everyone at home and anyone watching and who are going to watch this later is the importance of isolation and quarantine. You hear a lot of discussions about pods, and pods mean different things to different people. So let me define your pod. That is your household, the people you live with. That's it. As soon as you interact with another pod, which is at work, at somebody you go to lunch with, somebody you go to a game night with, or a sports club with, you are now mingling pods. So think of it as two Venn diagrams coming in together. Once those two touched, they're not mutually exclusive anymore. So I'll be creating something that would be able to get that more to the public so that we can get that information out. But in the meantime, I will share my screen in a little bit so that I can show, I can't express it any better than what Johns Hopkins has expressed it in a quick 1-minute video. So if you would be willing to indulge me, I can just put the 1-minute video and then I'll go straight to questions, if that's okay. Okay, share screen. So it's visual. There's no real audio. So I just, for anyone watching, or there is audio. So the reason I just put that on there is just so that we can see how much better we are doing than the rest of the country. Our positivity rate for the last 7 days was 7.9%. Around the country, it's more than 10% is what Johns Hopkins is putting out. We've had over 180,000 cases in the last 24 hours across the country. And in Massachusetts, we only had a couple thousand. So I think it's really important to understand when we're actually comparing ourselves, which is what we're seeing a lot on social media. There's a lot of comparisons on how we are doing versus how other areas are doing. It's really important to understand that we are still doing very well. And this is a surge that was expected due to holiday gatherings and travel. So we're going to be wrapping our heads around this as much as we can, and I'll be able to give you a more comprehensive outlook in the next meeting. And I'll turn it over to Gary, and if we have any questions, we can go from there.
Thanks, Roberto. Well, as Roberto indicated, it's disappointing to see numbers like this come into the community and impact families and lives, but it is here, and so we do have to make sure that we keep a focus on it. It's significant in that we haven't had caseloads like this in the past, but I can say that both the health department, the town, and the hospital through its EOC planning group that meets very often has done a lot of due diligence to make sure that we have resources available to address this here and ashore. I think that complementary what we know now is that as we develop cases here like this, statistically, we have to be concerned about the reality that we're going to start seeing people with more severe illness come forward than we have in the past. And that comes at a time when there's three things happening, which is why we've had a call out to the community to help us stop this by using good behaviors and limiting the number of people that they're with. We're not seeing that that's occurring to the levels that we would like from a public health perspective. So you have three things occurring right now. The first is that you have basically an overwhelmed drive-through portico at the Cottage Hospital that's trying to handle both symptomatic and asymptomatic testing for individuals who have decided to travel or who have decided that they're curious about their status because of some contact with an individual, or they're symptomatic and they're coming through because they want to be tested and they're ill and they should be tested. It's certainly why we have it set up. You have a time of the year where and a larger population staying on the island, and more people are receiving healthcare. There are more routine admissions to the Cottage Hospital, and so our inpatient status is limited from the standpoint of how many people can we put in the hospital. So today, we executed an incident command and a surge plan to test our ability to surge the Cottage Hospital into larger patient numbers. And those are all factors of planning that we put in place to ensure that we can hope for the best and not see the worst, and keep as many people, both routine and where appropriate for COVID, on the island. We are seeing higher numbers of routine patients in the hospital, not higher numbers of COVID, and we certainly would hope that we don't. And then we also are at a time where we, as an EOC and a community, are planning to receive vaccines and vaccinate first responders and those in the community that keep us safe, the police, the fire department, our community workers, the hospital personnel. And that's taking a tremendous resource, assets that are very limited on an island this size, to plan all the logistics around all of that. So there's three things coming together that make this challenge that Roberto just highlighted and Johns Hopkins is aware of, very concerning. So I would just say that from the standpoint of caseload that we are currently seeing, we do hope that it reduces. We do think that as we move into the next week or so, we'll see that caseload drop. But then we are moving towards Christmas, and there's that possibility then of more people traveling. Although I'm told it historically hasn't been a large travel time for the island, we want to be prepared to address that as well. The good thing on the coast that I think I started to say but didn't mention fully is that there is capacity. There is good experience at all of the main tertiary quaternary hospitals for helping us manage what we might have to transfer. So our goal will be to stay under the need for that. Weather is going to be a factor, and certainly with a full hospital and adding COVID into that as well, we have limited resources. So that is the concern that we've been talking about for the last 9 months. So it's real. We need the community's help, and we need a constant focus. And I just want to say to those viewers that are out there listening tonight or will in a recording that this town has done fantastic planning as a group. I don't think you could see it done better in any other community across the country. So with that, I'll turn that back over to Roberto and just say that we need your help. So please help us stay safe.
Absolutely. I think more than anything, the questions that you may have about what's going on is more than what we can just regurgitate at you. So please, any questions?
Okay, I'll open it up to any questions from the board or any community members. It looks like we've got 92 participants this evening. Christy?
Thank you. I first just wanted to thank the hospital and their staff. I saw a recent article by the Cape Cod Times that the Cape is experiencing a testing desert where they don't have as much access to testing, and Nantucket has rated really high in our access to testing. And I saw there was a record number of testing last week. So first, just wanted to say kudos and thank you. And for my question, you mentioned that you're starting to plan for a vaccine, and I'm just wondering kind of how that planning's going, anything that the public could be aware of or notified of how that process will go forward.
Yes, absolutely. We actually have a planning task force, a staff planning task force right now that's going to meet Monday morning to go over the plans as we have it. The reason we don't have anything out publicly right now is actually an oversight on every level, public health, from the CDC on down to the local community. When we wrote our emergency response plans and our emergency dispensing site plans, it was never anticipated that the strategic national stockpile, which is what this is going to be coming from, was going to be forced to coordinate with private entities and other areas in the public. So emergency dispensing plans were we never actually had templates. We never actually had a method to boil it down to something digestible. So I'm working on that now, because otherwise, and Libby's, I think, sick of seeing this, but otherwise we're showing everyone this file. This is our emergency dispensing site plan, and it's pretty big. And on top of that, we have our Department of Homeland Security plan, which is another folder on top of this. So I'm going to be boiling this down to hopefully no more than about 5 to 10 pages, on something that we can get out there, something out into the public with how we're going to get this vaccine distributed. And that's my charge this week. So I'm gonna try to boil all that down for everybody so that we can get it out to the public. But in short, in a nutshell, yes, we have a plan. We have 3 specific plans for getting it out to the public, 3 different methods of distribution. When I was talking to the superintendent this morning and yesterday, we talked about how there's another way to do it as well, through a different traffic pattern to do drive-through testing. And then we also have an in-person testing program, which is what's called a pod, another type of pod, a point of dispensing, a different definition of pod. And then there's EDS, the emergency dispensing site. So you'll hear a lot of acronyms being thrown around over the course of the next few months. But what it really comes down to is bringing people into the main area of the high school and middle school, doing your check-in there, getting triaged into a line, getting your shot at the line, and then going out in one of the opposite directions so that we're not clogging traffic. And that's the central point of dispensing. We will have what's called closed pods, closed points of dispensing, which is individual private entities that will be vaccinating individual staff. For example, the hospital will be getting a certain amount of doses so that they can inoculate their own staff as well. So there's multiple plans out there, and there's also the plan that the federal government is going to be sending to us now, which we're just getting some information trickling in actually within the last hour. So we'll be getting some of that information out as soon as possible. Sorry, I don't have a direct answer for you right now.
Go ahead, Christy, follow up.
Thank you. That's really helpful to just start to hear the plan. Do you think there'll be any issues with our census numbers and trying to get the right number of vaccines to the island?
No, when we do our plan, we actually have to account for the largest population that we're responsible for, which for us, we calculate our EDS off of 38,000 people. So as far as the SNS, the Strategic National Stockpile. So as far as the SNS is going to pay attention to, they're going to calculate our necessity on a population of 38,000. If we're able to reach a herd immunity level before 38,000, we can contact them to slow down the amount of vaccine coming in so that they can get it to more people. The standard practice is they will get us 25% of the shipment. We get that out, or between 10 and 25% of the shipment. We get that out, they check in, see how much more we need. We let them know, they'll get us whatever they can at the time. Then they check in, see how much more we need, and we go from there until we've vaccinated as many people as possible.
Melissa?
Thank you so much. I'd like to echo Christy's thanks to the hospital. I actually started to not feel well yesterday, and I waited in line for 2 hours, which actually flew by while I was on my phone for a COVID test. I don't think I have COVID, but out of an abundance of caution with a few symptoms, I'm waiting to see. And I was so impressed with the organization of the staff with managing the traffic, managing the ease, the politeness. If they were worn out and exhausted, no one would have ever known it. So, Gary, please extend our heartfelt thanks to your team. They're doing just such great work on behalf of our entire community. I'm very grateful.
Oh, appreciate those words, Melissa and Christy. Thank you. I'll certainly pass on those comments.
So I have a couple of questions just on the vaccine thread. The one thing that is, I'm a member of the Cape Cod and Islands Reopening Task Force, and one of the things that was mentioned yesterday was a concern of return of seasonal residents in the late spring with the vaccination timing. And so, you know, that number of 38,000, we actually may need many more if we've got more people returning. So on that point, Roberto, is there an issue with that, or if visitors are coming and wanting to get the vaccine while they're here in July, something like that?
If well, hopefully by July we should have 3 types of vaccines already, 3 different vaccine providers providing vaccines. So if things go well, we should be able to have a steady supply of vaccines at that point.
Okay.
If we don't have a steady supply of vaccine at this point, it turns into a kind of a triage, and there is a federal standard for that,
Okay.
that we expect to be getting when we start receiving the vaccine. There is a method to restrict who gets the vaccine, to make sure that it's only residents, things like that. But when it comes to something like this, I think the more people who get it, the better, regardless of whether they're here or somewhere else.
Great. Fabulous. Thank you. So Roberto, as we're heading towards that 10% number, I know on your previous presentations, 10% was sort of an action threshold for us. Is that still the case? And could you remind us of what kinds of things we'd be looking at if we do hit that 10% number?
So we're looking at something completely different at this point. And I know 10% was definitely our threshold from the metric that we set back in about April.
Mm-hmm.
As we're going through it, and as we're seeing that with what we're seeing right now is actually household to household transmission, and has absolutely nothing to do with our economic situation. So for example, you're not seeing spread at the restaurants, you're not seeing spread at Stop and Shop, you're not seeing spread at any of your other retail. So it would feel unnecessarily draconian to start putting restrictions on businesses when they're not the point of exposure. There are some points of exposure that we are looking at between some of our other businesses. You know, we've been hearing a lot about construction and landscaping, and that's a conversation we will be having as we move forward. We don't want to just go after a fly with a bazooka.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking into so if we do hit that 10% threshold, and we do look forward into other types of lockdown, shutdown, that sort of thing, it would be targeted. It would be targeted interventions. We're not looking, nobody wants to see a shutdown like back in April, like we saw back in March. Nobody wants to go there. It'll be very targeted, and it'll unfortunately have to hit some industries because that's where we're seeing the spread.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that anything we can do to help prepare, particularly our business community who maybe rely on holiday seasonal income. I'm thinking of our retailers and our restaurants right now. Anything we can do to help them plan in advance so there's nothing shocking this system any more than it already is shocked for those folks, I think is important. So I appreciate that. And my last question is a little bit more of a rhetorical question for both you and Gary, but is there anything more that we can be doing from a policy perspective to help slow this spread?
You know, we're tossing that hot potato back and forth. You know, the country's adrift, and people are tired of this. That's why you see the travel. Folks are aware. We can talk about the precautions until we're blue, but if we don't practice it, we see those things that are occurring now. And unfortunately, the worst case scenario is that people die from this. I received a notice yesterday of a friend who lost his son, who's 36, with a wife and 2 children. He's gone. It's just shameful that we are not as cautious as we can be when we have something that's preventable. So I would just implore all of the leaders of this island to keep talking about what we should be doing as human beings to take care of one another, love one another, protect one another. It's so important. And we've got the right tools in place. We have the right science in place. We've learned a great deal in the last 8-9 months. We're learning as we go. I don't really have another way to answer that question anymore. It's a preventable illness. We need people to take it serious.
I'm just going to repeat the quote I gave the newspaper. Relying on other people's responsibility is a pipe dream, and that this is an illness that requires personal responsibility and responsibility to others. And we as a country have proven time and time again that personal choice is not a reliable preventative measure. We need everyone to step in. Don't fix when you go to travel. If people are traveling, just don't. If you're planning on travel, don't travel. People are dying. A lot of people are dying. And we can do messaging, we can do outreach, we can do support. But there's no more policy that we can do now at the local level, short of any sort of in order to stay at home. That will change much things. People need to do what's best for the community, and it requires personal sacrifice. And as a country, we tend to shy away from anything that is an inconvenience. And a short time of inconvenience, a little bit of pain now solves a lot of pain later. And I think that's probably where we'll stay.
Thank you, Roberto. I did have one question, and I don't know if we have the capacity for this. I know that we've started to talk about it a little bit on whether additional tests can be made available if people will self-pay, and if they could be done on an appointment schedule to avoid the 2, 3, 4 hour car lines. Are we any closer to maybe being able to get something like that in place? If it's a self-pay test, is there even the capacity to do any more tests than what we're doing?
Well, the answer is there's not more capacity to do more tests in a workflow that uses one group of people. There is a major hurdles in logistics and setting up something that for 1 minute is free, and the next minute's for pay with credit cards, and requires a method to distinguish when you should be able to come over and get that testing. But all hope is not lost on that. We do have some things that we're looking into that might offer a solution to make some of that possible. If we were to use just the work streams that we have now, we would not be able to continue to work in the peaks and flows that we currently have. We would actually have to do less testing in order to accommodate a scheduled workflow, a credit card workflow, and so forth. So we are a small island. I think that we have, as I've heard tonight, done many things well related to being able to accommodate testing, and we'll continue exploring every option. But the numbers that we're seeing of spikes of 276 was the record this last week in one day. We just don't even have the space to do that kind of testing well. So give us a few days to think this through some more. Our teams met this morning. We're meeting weekly around all of what we're learning, and we hope to come up with better solutions. But as of today, that is the capacity that we are able to project.
No, that's well above the 75 that are the free tests. I know that we made resources available to go up to that 276, which was phenomenal to do that many in one day. And I don't want you to take this as a criticism at all. I'm just wondering if there are any ways to make it even better for people.
I'm with you. We're working to see how we can expand it. And thank you for that understanding. No criticism taken. The teams that you have on this island working in coordination are phenomenal.
Jason, I'll go to you, and then we do have Bob DaCosta has his hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to hear that there is still capacity right now. Thank you, Gary. Also, thank you, Gary and Roberto and the team for getting the letter out there, the video on NCTV 18. I think it's really important when a shockwave of a 46 number comes through that we see Roberto's face and Gary's face. Even if it's stuff we already know, it's still good to just hear it again. Like, we know we shouldn't travel. We know we shouldn't do gatherings. And, but that it definitely, there's fear out there. So is there, Roberto, I really like that the data that we're collecting and the contact tracing, you're finding out where these things are going. It's not in retail, it's not in restaurants, it's in these other certain areas. It's too early, but can you tell us is contact tracing going well for the 46 cases that came? That's over 2 days. Are people complying? Do you feel comfortable so far?
Well, we can never be 100% sure whether a person, you can tell us you're quarantining every day, but tracking 46 people is going to be really difficult to do on top of the people who are supposed to be quarantining from the positives from last week too. Mm-hmm. Or isolating is more the correct answer. So contact tracing is going very well. And Gary, if you can answer that too as well. Contact tracing is going well, and Elizabeth gets a hold of people very quickly. But with 46 cases, we do need to transfer some of these to the CTC. The big complaint about the CTC is that they are slow, and they're handling the contact tracing from the Sagamore Bridge through Provincetown all the way down to the two islands. It's the same group that's working on those two. So they are a little slow, but they are getting to people, and they are doing the contact tracing as they can. It always goes a little bit slower when you have to do multiple languages, which is across the country right now. And then also sometimes you just simply can't get a hold of people. And that's the part that gets a little bit more difficult. But Elizabeth has done an amazing, unparalleled job. Just like the people out in the portico inside the building, Elizabeth has been also, it's the same, she deserves so much. So, and Gary, if you want to add anything.
Sure, Roberto. Maybe to set the tone a little bit differently. We do have Elizabeth Harris, who's our nurse. We share the resource with Roberto. She's fabulous. She contacts everybody initially, and then she enters the information into Maven that occurs through our laboratory, which is the tracking system that Roberto uses. It goes to the state, and it falls into the hands of the collaborative that's been set up. And let's be frank, the collaborative is getting overwhelmed. They are trying to deal with everything on the coast. They're doing everything they can to get to our entries that we put in. They do get to them, but we do get comments and calls back and Facebook entries to say, I've been waiting 2 or 3 days to get somebody to call me. Well, we do know that once you've been identified as positive and you've been contacted, we're asking that you quarantine. That just means we will call you, but calling you doesn't heal you. Time heals you. And we want that information from other people. And we do want to get it as fast as possible. But when we're dealing with spikes that are occurring now across the nation, and especially in Massachusetts, it takes longer to call those people back. So we ask for patience, and we do know that there is follow-up. It is not as fast as it was in the early days when we were looking at a few cases in March and April, and Elizabeth could do that contact tracing by herself. So it's got to be supported by the collaborative, who I think is doing an overwhelming amount of work. And it's not glamorous work. They get people that are rude to them, and the turnover is high in those roles. So we want to keep the focus forward. We want to make sure everyone knows the resources there, but it's a tough job. If you can imagine, folks are not always receptive to hear that they are positive, and that we're asking them to tell us about where they've been, who they've been with, and stay at home. So we're leaning into it, and there are resources.
Oh, thank you, Bob DaCosta. Then I'll come back to you, Matt.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to thank you all for what you've done and say to Roberto that I'm happy to hear that you're not going to panic at this point and shut down businesses based on this 10% threshold. I think that we all have to take a minute and think about the fact that it was a holiday travel time. People got tested before they left, and now they're getting tested when they come back, and we have to expect some spikes. But the fact that we were doing so well compared to the rest of the country, and I wonder how many of these cases of the 46 that we just had weren't work related, or if they were more travel related, and you know, and people are getting tested every time they get a runny nose, or they get a cough, or they think they have a chill or a body ache. So we just need to, although the 46 number is concerning, I don't think we need to panic yet.
Bob, this is Gary. I would just say, panic is certainly not in the cards at all. We're ahead of the curve of where we should be, although we'd like to see us flatten the curve again. And I want to throw out the hope that's on the horizon, and that is with vaccinations. And I'm seeing information that is positive around the delivery of the development of these different vaccines. And there's a large campaign that's going to come out nationally to talk about the efficacy, the safety, the science behind the vaccines. Let's debunk that this is something that, you don't want to get. You want to get these vaccines to save you and your family from the horrific outcomes that can occur from a COVID infection, not just from saving your life, but not having to have the mental capacity drawn down, physical weariness that you continue to have, not being able to breathe, and having to worry about other diseases that come along like flu or anything else, measles, mumps, and rubella. The science is new, and from what I've read and what I know in my public health background, the science has shown that we're in a new realm of science, which allows us to move things quicker forward safely. And from what I'm reading from those that are in the extreme no on this environment, I will be the first person in line when my time is authorized, not before, but I want to make sure that I contribute to the community's safety and to my family's safety. So I think that's the great focus that's coming. The great hope is that we're going to start to see this ebb across the world within the next year, and sooner if those vaccines can come out faster. So let's keep that in mind.
One quick one about the vaccines. Sorry, Don. One quick one about the vaccines. It's really important. Just like Gary said, it's good for everyone. And I think what's really cool to understand is Pfizer's vaccine is coming out. They're talking about the capacity to be able to pull out 1 billion doses in a year. Moderna vaccine is talking about possibly getting 500,000 doses this year alone, and then next year being able to have a capacity of about 600 million. And then if AstraZeneca's vaccine also gets approved within the next month or two, if that goes well as well, they're expected to be able to do 700 to also about 1 billion doses in a year. So for every time that a new vaccine gets approved, the wait time gets smaller. So that's really good news coming in the horizon. Just because we get the vaccine, though, doesn't mean we're going back to normal immediately. That is also very important to understand. It will say, yes, 1 billion doses in a year, 2 billion doses when you count everything in, about 2 billion or so. There's 8 billion people on the planet, so it's still going to take a while. We're still not going to go back to normal as soon as those vaccines hit the streets. But the quicker we can get it out there, the better it is for everybody.
Matt?
Yeah, I was just going to say something. First, I was going to say we shouldn't panic like Bobby did. I was going to say something similar about the vaccines, but we have to hope. I think people have to realize, Roberto kind of just said it, that this isn't going to happen overnight and that this is going to take a while, and we better not let our guard down between now and then. You know, the time that we have to be sort of serious about this is, you know, sort of relatively short compared to what it might have been, you know, a while ago, maybe what we thought. But if people let their guard down between now and then, we could still have a bad results out here. And so I think that, you know, we still have to be serious about it. My question for, you know, sort of for Roberto, with 46 positives, how many people, do we track the number of people in quarantine or isolation? And how many is that currently?
We do. I don't have my spreadsheet. I haven't updated it with today's spreadsheet, but we do have that. And I'll be able to get that spreadsheet out. But we do track how many people are in quarantine. I don't have it in front of me right now. I'm sorry. The last time, because we get a list. Elizabeth, the same nurse we were talking about, sends me a list of the recovery date that everyone has recovered. So as of earlier this week, before today's 46, we've had, come on, Excel. Sorry, give me just a second. We had 28 people still in quarantine earlier this week. So counting today's 46, 46, I'm sorry, I still have to draw out my math. 74 people are still in quarantine.
And how many are in isolation? How many had contact with those people are in isolation?
Oh, sorry, this is the people who are in isolation. These are the people who are positive. The 74 are the ones who are positive that should still be in their 14-day isolation period. The contacts that we have, that I don't have that list because that's hundreds.
So Matt, if you go to our website, you know, and click on the button, that data is there. And right now, the patients covered are 280 and the patients in isolation are 106, with numbers from today. And of course, we've had our 3 deaths, but we update those each time, you know, we update the page.
Yeah, and those are the positives though. What I don't have is the contacts.
Right. That's the point I'm trying to make, is these numbers are exactly what you're describing. And what I'm wondering is how many other people, you know, if each contact has an average of 4 people, if each positive has an average of 4 people, then there's 4 times that many people still that should be staying home and isolating themselves. And that, what is that? No, that's what I'm checking. And that would also tell us, unless I'm wrong about this, that would tell us sort of the efficacy of our tracing. You know, if we're only finding the people who are positive and there isn't a pile of other people who have been in contact and are supposed to be isolated, then that's, you know, then we could say, well, maybe, you know, are we doing well or are we not doing well? That's sort of what I'm driving at. And how do we do that and gauge that, you know, and improve that if necessary?
Roberto or Gary, could you guys also speak to the new CDC guidance that came out today about the number of days?
I didn't have a chance today. I didn't have a chance today to read it. Gary, did you?
Yeah, I did, but I don't think that I'm prepared to put the numbers out there. I'd rather just maybe provide it to the INCI and have them publish it. You know, there's still a 14-day quarantine period for some. There's less for others that have been tested. That's still, you know, and then so there's 3 categories, but I wasn't prepared to speak to that this evening. I think we'll just.
Sorry, I read something that it was 7-day isolation if you're a direct contact, but you have received a negative test, and 10-day if you are a contact but do not get tested, just choose to isolate. But that was what I read. So you guys can follow up on that later.
Yeah, we would have to follow up and I'll be able to get things out more. Yeah, sorry.
No, there's a lot happening. Don't worry. Is there anybody else have any other questions tonight? I think I know we talked earlier that the holiday guidance is probably going to be exactly the same. Don't get together except in your pod. No new Board of Health orders, as you already discussed, probably. And I think we've already covered all of the rest of what's on this list. Can I move on out of COVID for now? Thank you, everyone. Public comment for items not related to COVID-19 or anything that's not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. This is when anything can be raised. It may not be commented on tonight, but it's the opportunity for the public to bring anything to the attention to the board that they would like to.
Hey, Don, I just have a quick
David?
comment.
Yep,
I just
sure.
wanted to let everyone know that the sewer project is continuing up in the town area. I don't know if anyone has been around to witness the cured in place pipelining that's going on. It's been very interesting to watch and very successful. And as of today, we had not had any excessive complaints for odors or noise or anything like that. But they're going to be in the Westchester Street area again still tomorrow, and then within the core district down by Easton Street. So they're moving along pretty quick. Just wanted everyone to know.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move on to approval of minutes. We have some minutes from November 17th. Are there any changes or questions from the board? Otherwise, I'll take a motion.
Move approval.
Oh, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call vote. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you. Approval of payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
Motion to approve.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Next, we have pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments on the contracts?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those
Second.
in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Consent items, we have gift acceptance, Human Services, Salt Marsh Senior Center and Town Administration.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you. Citizen departmental requests. We have the Nantucket Land Council. This is the second time that this has come up. It's the restriction on 31 Starbuck Road.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Sorry, can you read the motion that's in the AIS, please? Because it notes about the, if you need me to read it, and then you can just say that. Motion to approve the conservation restriction to be held by the Nantucket Land Council for land located at 31 Starbuck Road, Nantucket, and to find that the conservation restriction is in the public interest.
Is that the motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Carries unanimously. Thank you for being here, Emily.
Thank you.
Next, we have request for sewer connection fee reduction for 16 Field Avenue to rate effective prior to sewer regulations, fee amendments as of June 1, 2020. This has been continued from November 18th. We have Laura and David here from the sewer department. We have Carol Hillian, who is the requesting, and her representative, Jeff Blackwell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Um, if I could, I'd like to give you a brief recap of the details of the application. The request is for the Sewer Commission to apply the old sewer connection fee structure for Carol's application, a specific and relatively rare category of applications. Prior to implementation of the June 1st, 2020 amended regulations and fee structure, applicants connecting an existing dwelling to the Nantucket sewer system within 5 years of sewer availability were charged $500, which was 1/4 of the fee charged for new dwellings. The 2020 regulations eliminated this accommodation and now charges $4,000 for any permit. In 2018, a developer purchased 2 Morgan Square at the south end of Field Avenue. That person realized that the single lot could be subdivided into 2 lots and developed more intensely, only if the lots were connected to town sewer. The developer installed the sewer line in Field Avenue up to Cherry Street. The lots have since sold for a profit of approximately $3 million. On October 22nd, 2019, the sewer department approved the Field Avenue sewer installation. At that point, 12 property owners along the new sewer line became obligated to connect by October 2021 in order to comply with Board of Health Regulation 69. The sewer department provided me with a list of approved and pending sewer connection permits for the period July 6 to November 27th, 2020. Of the 23 permits approved, only 1 is in the same category as Carol Pillion's application. 22 of the 23 permits are for new construction, the construction of new dwellings or pool cabanas, or for the connection of older homes to old sewer lines. Of the 17 pending applications, only 3 are in the category of Carol Pillion's. The old fee structure recognized the sudden imposition of expenses upon property owners who do not share the financial benefits of a new sewer line, but are subject to unanticipated costs. If the Sewer Commission feels it is fair for owners in Carol's specific situation to be allowed the fee reduction contained within the old regulations, I see no reason to change the current fee structure for issued or pending permits, or to issue refunds for the other categories of permits, the majority of which are for new dwellings. Going forward, applicants of Carol's specific category could apply to the sewer department on a case-by-case basis until the June 1st, 2020 regulations could be amended to add back the permit fee accommodation contained within the old regulations. That sort of recaps the issues, and I wanted to specifically address the sewer department response, where basically there was a wholesale refund of permit fees that have already been paid, described, but the nuance is most of the applications like Carol's, or most of the applications are for new dwellings. Carol is a longtime owner who has a perfectly functioning septic system, and the imposition of the new fee structure is an unwelcome and unanticipated fee in order to comply with the Board of Health law. So that's all I have, and I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
Members? I know David is here, and I know that Laura was not with us last time. I didn't know if either of you wanted to speak to the history.
David, shall I go? Okay, thank you. So very quickly, and I won't take up a lot of time, Madam Chair, as I know I was not here for the last meeting, regrettably, and I don't want to have to recap everything, from the beginning. The owner had contacted us on February 4th, aware that there was a potential for sewer increases and wanted to get her application in, as she was made aware that she would need to tie into the new sewer that was running adjacent to her property. Shortly after that, it appears in mid-February, according to Jeff Blackwell's letter to the town, that his services were acquired by the owner of Carol Pillion of 16 Field Ave. Exactly a month later, the town office is closed due to the Governor Baker's shelter at home order. And then our office reopened, fully staffed and open for regular hours as of May the 4th. 4 weeks after that, the sewer regulations were adopted by the board, acting as sewer commissioners, and we began enforcing the regs on that day. So they were adopted actually at the May 20th meeting and went into effect on June 1st. On August 4th, Blackwell and Associates had contacted us about the application for 16 Field Ave. After the regulations went into effect in June, we were contacted by Jeff Blackwell's office, by Blackwell and Associates, to discuss the new regulations and the new fee structure. We talked about some generally in some permits they were working on, and how the new regulations and the new fees would apply to all permits. So 2 months later, when we received the email saying that the permit application was about ready, about tied up and ready to be submitted for 16 Field Avenue, and the inquiry, so the $500 fee will apply, we had to sort of reiterate that the new regulations had gone into effect and would actually apply to this property. So the standing of our department is that in the cumulative 8 weeks, so the 4 weeks before Carol Pillion had hired Blackwell as their agent to put together their application, and our office is closed. And then the 4 weeks after our office is reopened and the sewer regulations went into effect, there are cumulatively 8 weeks that we could have accepted, the application could have been submitted. So our department stands with the information in the original AIS from November 18th, that it was through no inability of the town to accept the application that caused this to happen. It is a matter of timing, and there are other applicants who inquired within the same time range. But to be clear, that this time frame, I'm calling it an audit, is set at 6 months. It was January from 2020 to June 2020. So essentially from the beginning of the year to June 1st, when the regulations went into effect. This time frame was chosen because we could just be going back and back and back. The sewer permitting packets with rates are provided by this office. They're provided by agents, third-party agents. The packet is on the town website and can be downloaded by anybody at any time. So anybody could have a packet that has the old rates from the old regs in it. We update it, as things change. So we had to just set some sort of a target date. The range was set at January 20, because that was around the same time that Carol Pillion had made the inquiry. And then when the regs went into effect. And so as of the last meeting, select board meeting on the 18th to discuss this matter, there were 13 permits that had been issued and 19 pending permit applications that owners had called us or their agents and said, we are going to be submitting this. And they were told that the new rates apply and that they would be paying those rates. So we have just done our November closeout of all of our permits and updated our permit database And now, as it stands current to the end of November, there are 23 permits that have been issued. And again, it's in this inquiry period, the same inquiry period where they inquired within the last 6 months before the regs and were given packets with old rates under the old regs. And then they submitted their application, and we told them that in that 6-month period, there had been a change, the regulations had been changed, and there were higher fees. So there were 23 permits, 23 applicants pay the higher fee. And then we now have 17, because some people have moved up to being issued, 17 impending applications that will be coming in that will also be subject to the new rates according to the regulations. So I would also just add that when wastewater operations split out from the DPW in 2016, then this department, as the new sewer department, became all sewer all the time. We focus only on sewer. One of the things that makes our jobs easier are, in fact, the sewer regulations. We adhere to the sewer regulations. We refer to the sewer regulations. We're beholden to the sewer regulations. When there are any questions, we have the sewer regulations, and that actually makes our jobs easier, even when we receive concerns from our patrons, because we never lose sight of the fact behind every permit, there is a person. Behind every property, there is a person. And so acknowledging any concerns that come to us, there's the regs, there's the regulations, and there are the fees. And so as of the date of the effective date of June 1st, our department began enforcing those fees and the regulations, which took out the new sewer less than 5 years or more than 5 years. That provision was not included. So in the case of 16 Field Avenue, the provision in the new regulations no longer exists, and the fee that is linked to that provision no longer exists. The fee for new sewer connections is $4,000. There are some on this list that are in private sewer areas. Jeff has just mentioned about new dwellings or existing dwellings, but the fee, nonetheless, if they are in an area where private non-town sewer has been installed, and they are going to tie into that line, and they apply, they would have paid $500 under the old regulations, and they are now required to pay $4,000, and these have under. So of the 23 permits that we've received and issued so far, there are 5 that are in non-town sewer area. There are 2 that are in the Shimo project area that don't qualify for Shimo anymore because their properties weren't developed by the deadline. So they paid those fees. And of the new ones that are impending that we're expecting to come in, there are 5 more. So that's a timeline, and that is where we stand right now on the permit count. I'm sorry, if I may add one more thing. So as we focus on this target inquiry area, it's to give this is a sample of really what more it could be. Anyone could say that they had gotten permit packets from us. We document everything really well. How many permit packets we gave out, we'd have to check every email, every walk-in record. Every time someone walked in the office and took one out of the wall bin, because they can do that. We have no way of knowing what third parties, sometimes it's engineers, agents, surveyors provide those packets, what version of the packet it was. Anybody can go on the website. So it's the idea that an exception granted could also be requested by any other party in the same situation. The situation being, they made inquiry with us, they received rates under the old regs. When they went to apply after June 1st, they were assessed the current fees.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I just want to say, I'm a school teacher. I work at the Lighthouse School. I'm driving down the road. All of a sudden, it's being dug up. I said to my neighbor, "What's going on?" "They have to connect to town sewer." I said, "Oh, okay, fine." So I asked for, some quotes. It's going to cost me about $30,000 to do that. So I immediately contacted Jeff Blackwell and said, can you help me? Can you draw this up? It's going to be a lot of money for me. I'm a single person. So I called and I spoke to Laura, and she told me you have 2 years, it's $500 fee. I talked to her associate. I can't think of her name right now, Christine Herman. She told me the same thing. You have 2 years, it's a $500 fee. So at least in my mind, with all the trench of 17,000, the 6,000 to the town, probably 4,000 to the surveyor. And like I said, I'm looking at between $27,000 and $30,000. Imagine my dismay when Jeff said, oh, they just told me it's now 4,000, which makes it now about 34,000. And, the reason Jeff wasn't able to submit it by June 1st was because of COVID. COVID closed where I worked. It closed where he worked. I realized the town was only closed for a month, but Jeff was closed for 2 months. So because of COVID, it's going to cost me that extra $3,500. And to be honest with you, I don't think anybody else on my street has even applied. I mean, it's a lot of money for the average poor, year-round homeowner. So that's why I'm just amazed that the sewer department is not, following up on that. They told me you have 2 years, it's a $500 fee. So that's all I have to say. I'm trying to comply. I'm trying to do what's right. I'm trying to keep everything, I've always followed the rules, but now I'm like, this is just a little too much for the average, homeowner. So I'd appreciate anybody's other thoughts on this. Jeff has been very helpful, but he was closed for 2 months. So I thank you for listening.
Board members have questions? Christy?
Thank you. I have a question for the sewer department. Are there any other locations on island like Field Avenue where a sewer line was installed and homeowners have 2 years to apply in it and connect?
Anytime there's a sewer extension that comes in, it's reviewed, and the parties that are doing the extension, if they're in say a wetland area or something that has other restrictions for they will do certified mailings out to everybody, so people are notified that there's going to be some construction in the area or some sewer work being installed. The ability to tie in, it falls under Regulation 69, which falls under the Board of Health, and there's quite a detailed reason why there's a time limit to tie in. Right now we have, I believe, 3 other extensions, and an extension can be just as matter of someone going 100 feet down the road and tying into a gravity line once they've been added to a district. So each and every extension or private sewer, so to speak, is extremely different. This one happened to cover the entire length of Field Ave. There's have been another one recently issued for just on Folger Ave because people's septics have either failed or they want to tie to sewer. So each and every one, Christie, is uniquely different, except for timelines. They still have, if they're in a nitrogen sensitive or well recharge area or anything like that, they technically only have 6 months. If they're not in that type of a sensitive area, they have 2 years to connect.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm not. Well, first off, David, you're the only one who could have a picture of the sewer beds behind you. It's great. You can pull it off. It looks good on you. The first part, I think, is the regulations. I'm struggling with this when I hear because I know why this happens on some of the streets. I've been around long enough to know that somebody has found a big lot that they can subdivide and put bigger houses on, and it's worth spending a lot of money to bring a pipe down the road. So that person makes $3 million, and everybody else, that in some cases are paying $30,000, and that they hadn't planned on. And so that's the part, regulations, if we find something that's not fair, we have to find, I hope we find a way to adjust them to make them more fair. And I think this is a kind of a prime example of it in my mind. You've got a working class neighborhood who now has, a sort of an ability to pay problem brought on by others. So I think that's where I'm struggling. And I made some suggestions after our last meeting of how do we do this? Is there a way to do it? And nothing has come back sort of that answers it for me yet. I don't know how to handle it, but there has to be a way to make these sort of situations fairer. And, and I'm not, the $4,000, I think that's a good deal based on how, people who are paying $4,000 to connect that need to connect and want to connect, that's a fraction of what it costs for us to provide it. So I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing against the work that you guys do, which is amazing, but I see sort of something here that I can't quite, I can't quite support, but I don't know I don't know what we could put in place that I could support. And I think, so I'm not further along than I was.
Yeah, Matt, I agree with what you're struggling with. I mean, it feels a bit like people get this sprung upon them in a way, even though there are some extended timeframes involved. But then on the flip side, we pretty knowingly put these regulations in place, and I think we would have to do a broad regulation and policy change to alter this. So I think we need to think about that. And then I also look at what everything is costing these days, and really, unfortunately, like fees are rising across the board, and it's hard. But I have a client who just realized that she has to connect to town water. Not that the town is making her connect to town water, but she has to because her well was not actually located on her own property. And their permit from the water company is $7,000 for a water connection. So these are not out of the realm, and I know they were very carefully reviewed and discussed for a long time before we did put these changes in place. Melissa?
Thank you, Dawn. I kept raising my hand. I wasn't quite sure if you were finished yet, so I apologize if I was interrupting your stream of consciousness. But I agree. I'm also struggling with this. I think for me, it's less about the permit fee. We received a public comment from Meg Glidden today, and I think she had some really good and valid points. One, that though there was due public notice about the fee change, it was not actually noted that the debate was going to be about a fee change. And as much as we have to put responsibility for, community members to look at the public hearing notices, it's not on the top of everyone's list. And it's certainly not on the top of everyone's list during a pandemic. And I do think that COVID-19 plays a significant factor in the communication issues and the ability for people to get these plans submitted in a timely fashion. Now, why it took from June until August, that part is a little bit more confounding to me. If the plan had been submitted, I don't know, June 17th, and there was a 2-week window or 3-week window, to me, that makes a little bit more sense. So, I guess my question to Jeff is to understand a little bit more of why, when his office reopened, it took that long to get this permit in, particularly knowing that your office was aware of the fee structure changes.
If I could respond through the chair?
Yes, please.
As everyone knows, Nantucket is in a very strange real estate boom, despite everything that is happening in the real world. We continue with this Disneyland-like existence on Nantucket when it comes to most people's employment. And besides the usual load of sewer connection and sewer repair or septic system repair jobs. I have a backlog just like everyone else. And I don't think the question is really, why didn't I finish the job and submit to beat the clock on June 1st? I think the question is, why would a 5-year accommodation for people in Carol's situation be removed by the new regulations, and also with the fee accommodation that goes with it? I don't think it would take a sweeping change or time-consuming revisitation of the regulations, sewer regulations that were revised and adopted on June 1st. I think you could just take a very narrow focus here, not throw out the baby with the bathwater, and just recognize that in situations like this, which are actually in the list of provided permits that are pending or issued, we're talking about a situation that happened only 10% of the time, 4 out of the 40 matters that are provided as an example. I think the sewer commission can certainly amend their own regulations to tweak them, as any board can do, or any state regulation is done as situations come up. I mean, you can't anticipate everything. And I can't believe that there was recognition that, or discussion that the commission wanted to set aside and leave behind these very fair accommodations that were contained within the old set of regulations. I think you could very simply amend your regulations to add in this accommodation if that, fairness is how you want to approach this, without, blowing them up and starting over. So the old time period that allowed owners to prepare for this unanticipated expense was 5 years. I don't think we should be talking about, whether I beat the clock on the June 1st deadline. Carol would have been, I don't know. I think the COVID situation and, the change in the regulations, during the COVID matter are an unfortunate coincidence. So I guess that's my response.
Christy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm feeling a little torn the way that Matt is, in the sense that we've made a lot of accommodations for business owners this past year due to COVID. We didn't increase the liquor license fees. We've made accommodations to rent. So to not make an accommodation to a homeowner seems kind of not in line with a lot of the policies that we've done. At the same time, I want to make sure that it's a blanket policy. So that's kind of going back to my original question of how many homes out there were provided letters that said they had 2 years to connect, and this time period is still falling within that 2 years. I'm wondering if that's a way forward that we, reduce it to maybe $2,000, half the fee, or I don't know how the board feels about going back to 500. But if there's a certain amount of houses where we could make a blanket policy and it's a clear policy and not just this one-off house, but also provide some sort of financial support. So I'll leave that to the board and the sewer department.
I think the sewer department needs to answer that, but can I just add, on the June 1st, if we hadn't changed the regulations, it would have been 2,000. Is that correct?
No, it would have been 500.
The June 1st wasn't the deadline for it to go up to the full fee, which was 2,000?
No, the full fee adopted under the June 1st regulations became 4,000 across the board. An application received prior to June 1st for Carol's situation, connection of an existing home, not new construction, that would have been charged at $500.
Don, that's if she connected within a period of time under the old regulations. And if she had missed that period of time, then it would have been 2,000.
Right, but when was the deadline for that period of time to have the application in to still be on the 500?
There was no notification for them to have to even connect. There was nothing given out by the town to make force anyone in this area to connect. The 500 fee, as it was in the old regulations, was based on any new sewer being installed in areas where example is the Schimmel project. The town did a sewer extension there, and they were locked into a certain set of fees based off it's in the regulations. And during our discussions in the 2.5 years we did the regulations over, the 500 fee was kicked around. Does it go to 1,000? Does it go up to the old 2,000 and then go to the new 4,000? And with all of the discussions that we had, it made sense to go straight across the board with the 4,000 and do away with the 500 on all the other projects except for the Schimmel project, because they are locked in by regulation.
May I make another comment?
Yeah.
I was never notified by anyone that this had to be done. And I kept asking why. I asked Laura and no one ever had an answer. I was never notified by the town. I checked with all my neighbors. No one got a certified letter. So the whole thing from the beginning was, I don't think, handled properly, but.
The person that installed the line, or the property owner that installed the line, did not have to notify abutters because they weren't in any conservation restricted areas or wetlands or whatever like that. I do believe that they did notify some of the people, because I know some people initially were going to try to have extra connections put on their lots or work with I can't remember the homeowner's name now. But there has been no notification for the town, because we are not mandated to notify anyone to hook up until everything's adopted, everything passes inspection, the warranties and everything are valid. And then the regulation 69 from the Board of Health would kick in.
So when does the clock start ticking where they're allowed to connect for 500?
In the old regs, it was within 5 years from the
Right.
date the line was approved and inspected. The line's been approved and inspected for use, but it has not been adopted by the town yet by a dedication agreement, because I still believe that if we adopt these lines right out of the gate within less than a year, we assume an awful lot of responsibility and liability for warranties and stuff. So usually anytime after a year is when we push on to get the dedication agreements in, and then it becomes a town line and the town maintains it.
Okay, so this is not a town line yet,
Correct.
but now there's no provisions in our regulation for her to be subject to the $500
No,
fee.
the $500 piece of that did go away in the new regulations.
It went away entirely in the new regulations.
Yes.
But she still has or everyone still has how long to tie into this line?
Technically 2 years, because it's a non-sensitive area.
But 2 years from
The
when
date
we
that
take over the line, or from?
The way the way it's written is once the town adopts and assumes control, I believe is how it's exactly written. So
Okay.
it's only, the line's been in the ground just about a year. And now we will start to press the proponent to take and do the dedication agreement.
So the 2 years starts ticking after the line is dedicated to the town.
That's the way I interpret it, yes.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that that we're very clear, but that has nothing to do with any provisions of a discounted connection fee.
Correct.
But
yes.
regardless, she still could have 2 years from the day that we actually take over the line, which we have yet to do, to sort out the financing to do this entire project, including the permit fee. Because the permit's not going to change from this point forward.
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I have the whole picture. Christy?
Thank you. Just got me a little bit confused. So if this isn't town owned yet and it's not required for Ms. Pillion to connect, would she have even qualified for a $500 fee, even if this was submitted in June or prior to June 1st?
If I may.
Jeff, can I
Madam,
just have
through the
David
chair-
answer that and then go back to you? Let me just have David answer Christie's.
Yeah, the way regulation 69 is written, it says any sanitary sewer that's adjacent to a property has to connect. So whether it's, and there's still quite a few private lines out there on the island that I couldn't list them all, but there's still quite a few. And as soon as that line technically goes past, whether it's private or town owned, it still connects ultimately to the town main. And I don't know if Roberto wants to try to clarify a little bit of the requirement on Article 69, Regulation 69, but it's a Board of Health regulation that requires them to connect. It's not the sewer department regulation.
Okay. Thank you, David. I'll go to Jeff, and then if you want to make a comment, Roberto, I'll come back to you. Jeff.
Thank you. The Board of Health Regulation 69.02 says that you're supposed to connect within 2 years to any sanitary sewer line installed or approved by the Nantucket DPW. So it's from the installation date that the 2 years starts ticking. So if you want to, looking at the stamp on the sewer as-built plan that was submitted, the sewer department stamped the line approved in October of 2019. So, I mean, that's how I would pick the 2-year start date. The Board of Health regulations do not specify anything about when the town accepts the line formally. It just says when the sewer line is installed or approved. So I'd say the 2-year clock is ticking now.
I'd have to say I'm kind of concerned by this gap where people are using the sewer line and the town's not in full control of it, meaning the town doesn't own it. I thought that we were going away from that, where I just thought it wouldn't actually be in service without it being under town ownership. But Roberto,
There's a lot of them out there from years gone by that we're
from
slowly
years gone by, but I mean new ones.
The adoption that the permit E who put in for the permit in Morgan Square was in the sewer district, and they wanted to connect the sewer. We can only allow them till we can't stop them from connecting, and they did go past a bunch of other properties, and so now these other parcels are now subject to that stipulation where they have to connect. It's a needs area, but it's not a sensitive area. It's a deemed needs area. That's why they were put into the sewer district to start with.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we want all of these properties on sewer because it's better for the health of the island and our waterways. But we just want to be clear on our policy. Roberto, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, as far as the
regulation?
Yeah, as far as the regulation is concerned, the intent of the regulation is in the first paragraph. When it's there, it's to protect the environment and thing. So when it was written in 2000 and voted in 2003, it was, I don't know what the fines or fees that were at the time, but the fines, fees, and policies were always set by the select board. We are the enforcement agent, absolutely. But as I think both, in a way, both David and Jeff are correct in that the clock is ticking one way or the other. So it's just the connection is going to happen. The policy as far as funding and permitting and how much is going to get charged or anything like that was never under our purview, and that's squarely on the sewer commissioners, which is you.
May I ask another question?
Yes.
So I'm totally blown away by the fact that the town doesn't even own or has blessed this yet. So if I connect and something's wrong, are you going to tell me, whoa, you're up the creek without a paddle? David, please help me understand this. So should I wait till you've tested it and blessed it, or what? Why was I told 2 years and now it's not that way? Am I just not understanding and it's very clear?
Carol, let me get some clarification from David if he doesn't mind.
This line has been tested, inspected, and it passed the inspection and the pressure test that we require to have it put on it for a set amount of time, and it was witnessed by the sewer department staff.
Okay.
At which time, on any kind of connection like that, we take and deem the line usable, and the parties that either installed the line and connected to it can start to use it right away at that time. It had passed all the inspections and the standards and specifications. It's just that it hasn't gone through the dedication process yet. And that will start here coming up in the near future, because the timeline of the warranties and installation warranties that were given to the person who installed it will now be coming under, they'll be expiring. And then the line has served satisfactory in the time it's been connected to. So I don't know if that helps at all or not, but the line was inspected and it did a pressure test and it passed all the required testing based on the standards and specifications. And I think Laura was trying to get someone's attention with her hand there.
Laura?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may speak to the board through you, I wanted to address Melissa's point regarding the permit, the receipt of the permit for 16 Field Ave. So in August, when we were contacted by Blackwell and Associates, and they had inquired about what fee would be applicable, they had said that they were wrapping up the plan, this proposed sewer plan, and we're getting ready to submit the application. I just wanted to comment on Melissa's comment that, just to clarify, we did not receive the permit application in August. To date, we have not received the permit application for 16 Field Avenue. To the point regarding the adoption of the regulation. So as David said, the first draft of the regulations went to the town consultants, Hazen and Sawyer, with support from the Weston and Sampson Group on June 2nd, 2018. That was the first draft David had sent to the consultants. So that was exactly 2 years from when they were adopted. And I think over the 2 year period, they had kind of gone back and forth through different levels of review. We began, it just as part of public outreach, because yes, there are legal notices in the newspaper, there are select board meetings, you know, someone has to be reading the paper at that time and reading the legal notices or on the select board to glean that information. In our office, as we have no way of sort of, doing any kind of a, mass communication with the public, of course, about a year before, I'm estimating here, but consulting with everyone in the office, about a year before the new fees were adopted, the new regs were adopted, we began notifying every applicant who called and said that they wanted to submit an application. Would we send them a packet? They were considering applying. Anybody that had even said that they might hold off or they might do the main house, but they wouldn't do the cottage, we made it very clear that the sewer fees, the sewer regulations were under current review and were subject to change. When we were inquired, when that might happen, we said we were not aware. If someone pressed further, we'd say, they're in legal review, or they're under consultant review, or they're going to be presented to the select board for review. There was no way of us knowing that they were actually going to be adopted at that meeting. And after that meeting, we had this period of time before the effective date to sort of update all of our materials, get them uploaded to the web, change all the paper packets. There was a lot more behind the scenes updating. I think as far as the fee, in my recollection of being in part of those meetings regarding the revision to the regulations and the different drafts, the idea of the $4,000 permit was to, in my notes, it says to avoid confusion by having a single fee for a new permit application. It also was brought up about capturing the true cost of what it costs to process the sewer permit. So it's not just, I know sometimes processing fee sounds a little vague, but a lot does go into it. Engineering review, a lot of emails, notification to the various town departments about billing, the privilege fees, the usage fees to the water company, the assessor's office, the Board of Health. So there's a lot of communication. Sometimes there are emails that go back and forth between the review process and having to contact the engineer about making revisions to the proposed plan. And then there are the inspectional fees for our crew to go out at the time of installation to go out and inspect. And most of these take place in 3 phases, where our inspectors will go out and see what's from the house to the street, and then they have to go back and see what's the tie-in to the street. So I think that was part of the idea too, of capturing, because the sewer fee hadn't been increased since, I think it's over 30 years. I think it was in late 1980s that it went up to 2000. And so that was a discussion. That's why the 4,000 fee, I believe that was the rationale, the impetus of doing that. And then there were also the Novak recommendations about our crew, doing connections at the street, doing the final connections themselves. That was the idea behind it. But to be clear, this is not through a method of being, being defensive. We're not defending. What we are was we just enforce the regulations as they're written. That's we see is our job.
Thank you, Laura. Rick Atherton has his hand up. I'll go to you now, Rick. Rick, you're still muted.
Go.
Oh, there you are. Go ahead. No, you're muted.
You hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I just want this comment to be received, and I really mean this sort of respectfully to all the participants in the conversation you've had for, what, 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes? Given all the important elements of your strategic plan, I would hope you would have received some kind of clear-cut memo recommending a solution, from the town administration staff. It's hard for me to believe that each one of you can remember the first 10 minutes of this testimony, let alone the last 20 minutes. And how you're going to come to a conclusion, I don't know. But I think that kind of a recommendation would have been helpful for all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. There is actually a recommendation in our packet, and it is not to grant this request for various different reasons that they've outlined. Does the board have further questions or comments? I'm trying to see what the path forward might be for the board members. Matt?
I'm not sure I have a path forward. I just wanted to comment earlier. One of the things that's interesting is, we say we're doing this for, for the environment, but the problem is once we run a line in an area like this, everyone has to connect. But then all of a sudden we have more buildings and more hardscape, and we don't have any, we haven't done any study or any analysis of what that is doing to the harbor or to the groundwater or to the ponds. Like, we haven't figured that out. So, I think, we make an assumption sometimes, but I'm not sure it's backed on fact. And I think we're pushed by the incentive to build in these areas with the views and by the water and overlooking the harbor and overlooking the ponds is so huge. You know, as we heard earlier tonight, I'm not ready to to support the town recommendation, but I don't have the solution either. So I can't make a motion. I think we need some more work on this. But I don't know how we're going to get there.
Jason?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this, in all policy, there's always little loopholes or where someone is left out, and this is really unfortunate because it is a working class area. And I think it's fine if we go back and look at our policy and change existing homes hookups from 4 to 2, and we could do something like that. And if that's a direction the board wants to go, I'm fine with keeping the recommendation or going forward with the recommendation from the town and taking some time and looking at this. I don't know what the time frame is with this particular property, but that's where I stand. I think I'm okay with it, and at the same time trying to find another way I think it's okay to go back and maybe change policy when things like this come up, and taking it from 4 to 2 for existing homes when a private line is installed. So in a way, this is good that we're talking about this, and those are my thoughts.
Excuse me. So what my takeaway is that she has 2 years for this to move forward from when we take the line or receive the line, or whatever the proper wording is. So there is some time here. So I think that we could potentially go with the staff recommendation, but then maybe we do want to visit some details of the regulations to have a couple of special provisions or one special provision in here for existing homeowners in this situation that would then apply if she wants to wait to file for a bit. Melissa?
Thanks, Don. I'm because I wasn't on the board, and I don't think I was watching that particular meeting. Maybe I was, and to Rick's point, my eyes glazed over after 10 minutes. What was the rationale of this board when they adopted that policy to not keep the fee for existing homes reduced? Even if it did go from 500 to 1,000, what was the rationale to make all connection the same price? Do you remember what you were thinking when you did that?
I think it was what Laura outlined for an ease of having everything the same across the board. I guess that this is a little bit unanticipated for me, that it would have ended up this tight, that someone might have been caught off guard. So that's what I'm struggling a little bit more with. I don't think the $4,000 fee is unreasonable in the scheme of things. But I am worried about that shift happening more quickly than people who are not on all these meetings all the time are up on. Melissa?
And just as a follow-up, thank you, Don. I think that it is an unfortunate circumstance. I'm happy to hear that Carol and her neighbors have some time to do the connection. So to move forward on this tonight, I would make a motion to approve the staff recommendation with a caveat that this board pick up that policy and review that pricing structure at a subsequent meeting.
Second for discussion.
Second to that? Okay, thank you, Christy.
Just a question, just to add on, to also examine not just existing homes and new structures, but also see if there's a potential for a year-round residential exemption or discount, or just a discussion around that, if it's legal or possible, if you would accept that, Melissa.
I do accept that. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, Christy, I was actually going to go down that path of, if someone's sort of a proven year-round resident with an existing home, could we have a different fee structure for these type of new line situations. But I think we could revisit that later. Do you mind if I go to a vote? All in favor of the motion? Or Jason, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to double check with David and Libby that they have enough direction from us to come up, whether it's January or February next year, to what are we asking them to do?
I think so.
Okay.
I agree. I think so as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to a vote on the motion. Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
No.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. But remember, this is with the caveat that we are going to revisit and try and come up with a provision for this that's more tailored to these type of situations. And I think everybody understands where we're coming from. Melissa?
Thank you, Don. It did strike me that perhaps there was some lack of clarity around the timing that the folks have to connect to that sewer line. So what can we do to reassure Carol other than our word at this meeting? Is there some way to memorialize that it's 2 years from when the sewer department sanctions that line, and that date's forthcoming? I just want to make sure that we're clear on that for her and the neighborhood.
Erica, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, I think we're going to review the regs and get the exact language and get confirmation on that.
Yeah, agreed. I think we will define that piece in the regs as well. I'm sorry, you broke up for a second. It might be my.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think we're going to review the regulations. I've already printed out a copy and we're going to look at them very closely and see what the language states or what it should state.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. Matt?
Yeah, and if we review it, this may be an opportunity to, put in place something that does a couple things. If we, it's not just, are they written right? And I know that Erica didn't mean that, but the question is, can we, can year round have a bit of a break? Is there a way if, people are forced to do it, it can happen over time, or are we doing something like a covenant that's, a year-round covenant, and you don't have to pay anything, but it accrues interest, and if it ever goes out of the year-round category, it becomes due. So the town doesn't, there's no free lunch. We're getting money back. There's different ways to look at this, and I think it has to be some creativity, and if we use that, maybe we can get, maybe we can get more than just solving this one issue. But we can put in place some incentives for what we need right now, which is year-round and sort of worker housing. So I think that I think this is an opportunity if we can take it. My concern is, will we really have the time with everything else that's going on to look at it at that level? At some point, I think we need a separate sewer commission. I don't think we have the time, or the staff necessarily has the time to really do this as it's required. So those are my sort of thoughts and concerns.
Okay, I think that's diving in a little bit deeper. I mean, we do have a waiver of sewer permits for covenant, specifically covenant homes that are restricted to 150% AMI. I think you're talking about maybe something a little bit broader than that. But I think we were talking about really 2 points in regard to this of potential changes. Roberto?
So there are two things here. One, that when you are mentioning as a board, you're mentioning the regulation, and you're also mentioning the policy about connection. The regulation is a Board of Health regulation. So we would need to do our own Board of Health meeting with a public hearing, whole 9 yards, which is strictly just the connection section. So that's a whole different argument altogether. The fees and connection timeline, things like that. Is that the conversation you're going to have in January? Because if we're also going to be talking about changing the regulation, I also have to let my board know and do the 3 weeks of posting, do the whole thing.
I think we're talking about what's in our purview, which is the fee structure
Okay.
and the timing of the connection, not trying to jump over to your side.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I was kind of like, oh,
Clear?
okay. It was just like, oh, okay, there's a lot of logistics I got to figure out then. So thank you.
Or unless the board feels differently. I'm not saying
The timing is in the Board of Health regulation. So that's
the timing is all, it needs to be clarified in the Board of Health regulation as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well then maybe we are talking about that.
Okay, then I'll wait until you guys have done your part, maybe like in January, and then we'll change do a secondary hearing or something later on to clean up our end as well.
Okay.
Make them
thank you, David.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roberto. Okay, Carol, thank you. I think you've got a little bit of time. Thank you, Jeff. And
Thank you.
we're going to
Thank
move
you
on to the next agenda item.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. The real estate items are put over to the 16th, so that whole section is off. We are moving on to public hearing, which I think we have a number of people here tonight. I'm hoping maybe some of their concerns have already been alleviated. I'm going to open the public hearing to consider amending the Town of Nantucket regulations for the use of town-owned beaches and town-owned land adjacent to ponds and pond areas with respect to activities that might attract sharks to swimmable areas of Nantucket beaches. We have town council here with us this evening. We have Jeff Carlson. I'm thinking maybe Jeff wants to talk about this first and talk about the history and where we're at with the proposal.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. Hopefully my microphone is working now, as it wasn't when we were doing roll call. So good evening again. We're here tonight to talk about amending the beach regulations as they currently affect the town-owned and operated beaches. So right off the top, it's kind of important to remember that those regulations only affect the town-owned and operated beaches. They don't affect private property or other beaches owned by entities like the Conservation Foundation or the trustees. But really only applies to town-owned beaches that we're talking about. So as a little background, kind of late in 2019 and into early 2020, town administration had been contacted by a couple citizens and a couple groups about some concerns related to chumming in the waters kind of around our swimmable areas. And pre-COVID, they had asked us to kind of look at what something to deal with chumming might look like and to kind of draft the regulation to review and discuss. And that's kind of what's in front of us today. So the intention of the regulation that we put together and review with council, and Greg can certainly add in if he feels like I'm misspeaking to this, is to really kind of focus on additional attraction of sharks potentially into areas where swimming has kind of been concentrated. And by no means is intended to be any sort of prohibition on beach fishing or, fishing for any species, whether they're, bluefish, bass, sharks, whatever people are rod and reel fishing for, but to really focus in on that kind of additional attractant like chum or dyes that people have used historically for species like sharks, and to keep those separated from our swimmable areas, but to still allow people to get out there and fish and enjoy the water and fish by other traditional means like rod and reel using live bait or artificial lure or anything that's generally attached to traditional rod and reel fishing. So I'm happy to take any questions. If Greg would like to add anything, I think this would be a good time. But that was the general intent and kind of a real brief history to where this had come from.
Would it be helpful to put the language up on the screen?
Sure.
Current version of the language. And Greg, did you want to make any comments? And then I'll go to you, Jason.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Just as a point of further history here, back in 2015, the State Division of Marine Fisheries had in place a limitation or prohibition on shark fishing that stated that it prohibited any activity that lures or may lure any white shark to a person or vessel by using food, bait, chum, dyes, decoys, or acoustics, or any other means, excluding the mere presence of persons on the water, including those persons conducting commercial or recreational fishing activity. So that was a statewide regulation that was in effect in 2015. At some point between 2015 and 2020, that regulation went away at the statewide level. So as we started to look at this, Jeff and I, we started with that language that was in the prior version of the state regulations. And then we've refined it since then to address concerns that have been raised by the fishing community. And to make very clear, this is not intended to be a fishing regulation. This is solely a beach use regulation. And, what the town is trying to regulate here is an activity that is specifically designed to attract sharks into areas where people are likely to be swimming. So with that, perhaps Jeff can pull up the language that we've settled on, and then there can be further discussion in that regard.
Jeff, are you able to share that on your screen?
I
don't know if Erica has it.
To put up, so hopefully she can get it up there for us. My permission.
Erica, are you? Yep, there she is.
So we did make kind of an additional, we've been talking about that today, about adding to the end of that where you can see the number 4, that the no person shall participate in an activity designed to attract any shark. We've considered the last sentence after talking to some of our local fishermen, just some clarification to that where it says, this shall not be construed to prohibit the use of a baited hook or artificial lure when fishing with hook and line gear. About adding to the end of that sentence something that says fishing with hook and line gear for any species, including sharks, just to make very clear that if you're out with rod and reel and hook and line, that you can fish for whatever fish species you so choose, and do it in a manner that meets that kind of bait type, if that makes some sense. Sorry, I think I sent Erica the previous version.
That makes sense to me. Do board members have questions? Jason, you had one. And then Matt.
I'm sure we're going to hear a lot from the fishing community. A lot of people reached out to me and really concerned that this was going to reach into, to stop them from fishing and not be intended for what its cause was. So I just wanted to make sure that the public knows that I think, Jeff, you did talk to some people in that community and work with and are willing to add in any language that needs to be added in to make sure that the public safety part is there and taken care of, but it doesn't affect or prohibit any fishing.
Jeff?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think when we were asked to put this together, obviously, it's a public hearing for good purpose. And I never think that coming into any of these that it's not subject to any sort of revision or question. And I actually think it's probably best that it has that kind of review and scrutiny to make sure that it's accomplishing its task, but not having as many unintended consequences as possible. So again, we're happy to work too. I know I've spoken to Mr. DaCosta a number of times about it, and his concerns have been really helpful. And he was kind of the originator of some of that thought of adding that language to the end. And again, I think, hearing feedback from that community is important, as well as, hearing feedback from, some of the folks that originally had these concerns to try to get something that addresses the concern without, prohibiting people from doing something that's a very important part of the history of the island for being able to fish and go and catch really any species of fish off the beach and do something that I know is probably our most historic activity that we really do. So again, that's not the intent. And if people took it that way, I apologize for being unclear in that language, but I would love to hear their feedback and hopefully get something that meets the goal and gets everyone fishing and feel comfortable that everyone knows exactly what they can and cannot do.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll go to you, Matt, and then I do have 4 public hands raised. And and then Christy, I'll go to you as well.
Yeah, mine is real quick. Jeff, you said something about fish species, including sharks, and I have been given, someone had sent me they said to clarify it by finfish species, including sharks. It's minor, but it's what and I don't know if that's to get away from mammals, other, yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Obviously with fish, we don't want any sort of, confusion, whether it's finfish or shellfish or other marine mammals or anything. So I think that's a fair and proper adjustment to that language.
Christy?
Thank you. I have a question for Greg. You mentioned that the state removed the language, and I was wondering why. And my second question is there any other coastal communities that have a provision like this in their local regulations?
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. Honestly, I don't know what happened to that that language on the state level. It seemed to come in and go away rather quickly. And no, I'm not aware of any other communities who have taken this particular step yet. But I think that this has become a relatively recent phenomenon of the extent of the problem that sharks cause in swimming areas. And so I know that communities all along the coastline are looking for various ways to ease that tension. And so while I'm not aware of any that have specifically done this, it's my opinion that this is reasonably related to the protection of public safety without unnecessarily infringing on the rights of the public to engage in, lawful and reasonable fishing activities.
Jeff?
Yeah, if I may really quickly, Christy, when we were looking at this, we did some research for similar regulations elsewhere. And the most comparable, the state of Florida has a state regulation that prohibits the use of chum, and the sentence at the end that involves the hook and reel is captured kind of from their regulation and revised a little bit for here, but that whole state does. And there are a few other communities kind of within the east coast of the US that do, but Florida's is probably the most broad and kind of comprehensive.
Before I go over to the public hands that are raised, we are in receipt of a letter that Erica sent to me that the lady Carrie Harbison asked for it to be read into the record. So just bear with me for a moment. Dear Select Board members, this letter is in support of the proposed regulation on land-based shark fishing. There are 2 main factors for my support. The first is public safety and the second is shark safety. The following letter has research and quotes by some of the world's top scientists. There is a works cited section at the bottom for your convenience. In defense of public safety, the Division of Marine Fisheries warns the public in a Cape Cod Times article that any activities encouraging interactions with the sharks can increase safety risks by altering the behavior of the sharks. Such activities may result in sharks associating humans with food and prompt changes in shark behavior that make them more aggressive towards humans. Erin McNeil, the Canada Research Council Chair in Fisheries Conservation at Dalhousie University, said, "In my view, the Federal Fisheries Department still needs to establish a safe distance for shark fishing to occur relative to recreational users and exclude shark fishings within the zone." The following excerpt is from an article that was published by the Shark Research Institute to advise towns on minimizing human and shark interactions. For local authorities, locate swimming and surfing beaches up current from fishing beaches, i.e. fishing piers, and surf fishing areas should be located several miles down current from swimming and fishing beaches. Reason: sharks learn to seek food in specific areas such as fishing piers and surf fishing places bait in the water close to beaches. For local authorities, locate shark feeding sites at least a mile or more offshore from swimming and surfing areas. Reason: the distance from swimmers and surfers reduces the odds of negative encounters. for local authorities prohibit hand feeding of sharks. Reason, sharks learn and remember what they have learned. When a shark has learned to associate the human form with food, it may present a significant danger to humans, swimmers, or snorkelers that it subsequently encounters. In defense of shark conservation, 2 top shark scientists agree that landing a shark can have a significant impact on their health. Heather Bowlby, the head researcher for Canadian Atlantic Research Laboratory, said all of their muscle is concentrated in their back and it does press down. They don't have a rib cage. They're not designed to be out of the water, and that's why we have moved to tagging inside the water. Greg Skolmel of Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries said it could be creating long-term problems for the future reproductive success of the animal. It's an area that people are very worried about. In another article by the Animal Welfare Institute states, despite their roles as top predators, sharks are vulnerable to overhunting because they mature late in life, grow slowly, and produce very few young. In this respect, their life cycle more closely resembles whales and dolphins than that of fellow fish. In some species, individuals do not reach sexual maturity until the age of 20, and they can have a gestational period lasting up to 2 years. Once reduced, shark populations are extremely slow to recover. Some shark populations have declined by as much as 90%, and some shark fisheries that collapsed in the first half of the last century still have not recovered. A study is being done in Florida on catch and release shark fishing. It states that anglers fish with the assumption that their targeted species remain in the population. The study reports that over 90% of shark anglers in the US report they practice catch and release. NOAA 2011. Studies have shown, however, that many fish species, including sharks, undergo various levels of stress and mortality because of this practice, negating the intention of this conservation tool. The utility of citizen science data said that research in the mortality of sharks in land-based shark fishery are severely needed for stock assessments. In regards to the shark species in our waters, NOAA states the waters off the East Coast are home to more than 50 shark species. Of these 50, 43 are managed by NOAA. Fishing and other human activities in the 1980s and early 1990s significantly lowered some Atlantic shark populations. Also, according to NOAA, a major problem with amateur anglers is not being able to identify which shark they have caught. Here are the most common protected species that we might encounter around Nantucket. Dusky, sandbar, sand tiger, and white. All of these species are considered protected by the government. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate my support for this regulation. For the town's consideration, there are some precedents to land-based shark fishing regulations. Many towns in Florida have restrictions. For example, chumming is not permitted when fishing for any species from the beach or when wade fishing in waters adjacent to a beach. In addition, every fisher person over the age of 16 has to have a shark fishing license in addition to their regular fishing license. They are inexpensive, but one must pass a test first. Their reasonings are safety of divers, surfers, swimmers, and the effects of training sharks to associate humans with food. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Carrie Harbison. Thank you. Let me go to other members of the public that did not submit a letter. Robert DaCosta.
Hi, Don. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my comments. First of all, the regulation as it was written, with the way the first line that said, I don't have it up in front of me right here, but I'm trying to do it from memory, where it talks about.
Can we put it back up on the screen? Hang on one second.
Yeah, if you could do that.
Erica, do you mind?
Where it says no person shall participate in any activity designed to attract any shark species into a swimmable area. That's a slippery slope. I served with you for many years on that board, and I know when it says any activity and attract any shark, that can be open to all kinds of interpretation. The language that Jeff wanted to add at the end of the last line was actually my language that I gave to him that said, that that with baited hook, artificial line when fishing with hook and line. I added it to be either any species or any fin fish species, including sharks. I don't think anyone who's going to speak on this has any problem with stopping chumming, dives, decoys, or acoustics. What we do from the shore here is we throw a chunk of bait, sometimes live, sometimes dead, out on a rod and reel, and we catch a shark. And when we do, we bring it in, we put a tag in, and we release it. That tag data goes to NOAA, and it's invaluable for them to figure out about these endangered species. The sandbar shark, or brown shark as we call it around here, very little is known about where they go. And we've tagged hundreds of them from the beaches here, and the data that has been used to track these sharks and to help figure out where they go, the scientists find it very helpful. Nobody wants to attract a white shark to a beach here. That being said, I have no problem with putting a bylaw in place that says you can't use chum, because who knows down the road if some fool doesn't try to do it. The reason that the state dropped the bylaw back in 2015 was they put that in a hurry just to stop anybody from possibly doing shark charters like they do down in the Bahamas, where they put everybody in the water in a cage and start throwing chum in the water and let sharks swim up to the cages. None of that happens around Nantucket. What we're talking about here is guys going out to the beach, throwing out a chunk of bait. Sometimes they catch a bass, sometimes they catch a bluefish, sometimes they catch a shark. If you don't add that line to the end of this, you're going to get people calling you constantly saying there are people out here shark fishing and you need to stop them. And I don't even know if you have the ability to do that, because we buy a state fishing license from the state of Massachusetts, and the state tells us what we can fish for, what we can retain, what we can't retain, how we can fish. We can only use circle hooks for shark fishing. There's a state law that says that you have the right to fish and foul between the high and low water mark. And I think if the town starts writing regulations about what we can fish for and how we can do it, it's kind of a slippery slope. So I would add that last line, and I would leave the part in about no chumming and decoys and acoustics. I don't think you'll find anyone that has a problem with that, as long as that last bit of language gets inserted into this regulation.
Maybe I could just poll the board right now to see if anyone has any concerns with that language. I mean, that seemed perfectly reasonable to me, and that might alleviate some concerns of the other people that have their hands raised. But of course, I will go through it, each person. I can't see all the board members, but oh, Jason's got his thumbs up. Melissa had to step off. Christy and Matt. Okay, so let's move forward with the discussion with that additional line added for clarification that Jeff and Bob DaCosta have agreed upon, and town council is good with as well. Okay. Austin Gallagher is my next hand raised.
Unmute. Yeah. Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Austin.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for the discussion. This is great. My name is Dr. Austin Gallagher. I am a marine biologist, and I am from Hanover, Massachusetts. Currently live in Washington, D.C., but I've been doing research on sharks for the last probably 10 years off of Cape Cod, Nantucket, and the islands. I might even be one of the people in the letter that woman had referenced. And I just wanted to mention that I think that we just really need to really think about how white sharks have been on this planet for a long time. All these other sharks have been here for a long time. And the reason why these animals are coming close to shore, particularly the white sharks, is because there's an increasing population of marine mammals, specifically pinnipeds, which are seals and sea lions. They've been protected for over 50 years. That's something that we wanted to create, and because of that, those seals are drastically overpopulated, and it's bringing the white sharks in. So they are naturally going to come in. I work extremely closely with the fishing community on Nantucket, and we're thinking about the future conservation of sharks, which is a goal of all of us. We need to work with the fishing community, not against them, to achieve these conservation goals, to make sure these populations are robust. My entire PhD studies were on catch and release effects on sharks. in Florida. And what we found is that there are very few species that respond negatively to the process of catch and release. Matter of fact, all the species that are commonly caught, angled, and released off of Nantucket and Massachusetts have very, very high survival rates. And to my knowledge, there has never been a single white shark that has ever been caught from land, from the beach. So I think it's really important to just put that in context because, I think it's very easy for people who are not familiar with fishing and the process of catch and release to really see the science. And maybe someone doesn't like how something looks, but that doesn't mean that we should, automatically put it down, because in my opinion, the science that I'm quite familiar with all due respect, does not support the notion that fishing of any type aggregates sharks to the shores. And the final point I'd like to make too is that there's a very distinct, and Bob DaCosta mentioned this really well, there's a very distinct difference between chumming and just fishing. Chumming is a very intentional activity where people are dumping buckets of blood and trying to attract animals. Fishing, putting a piece of flesh on a hook is really quite different. And the fishermen are the real experts here. They know exactly what type of species those sharks that they're targeting, the fish they're targeting, go after. So they're actually much more selective than I think the general public gives them credit for. So to conclude, I think that we just need to be really careful about some of these slippery slope regulations and proposals, because they might actually end up doing more damage than success. And because white sharks and seals are both increasing in population off of the New England shorelines, and that's not going to change anytime soon, I don't think there's a lot of gains to be had by demonizing the fishing community. Thank you.
Greg Corbo.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. If I could just respond to the comments of these last two callers, and to make clear that, again, this is not a fishing regulation, and by including the final sentence that the regulation does not apply to rod and reel or line fishing for any species of finfish, including sharks, we were trying to make abundantly clear that there's a difference between legitimate and proper fishing activities that are allowed to occur on the beach and activities that are not within generally accepted fishing practices, and that constitute a danger to the public health, such as the use of chum or decoys or dyes. And so, and I will certainly defer to Jeff on this, but this is not in any way put forward in an effort to be against the fishing community. Quite to the contrary, I think it supports legitimate fishing activities, but while prohibiting activities that are dangerous for both people and sharks, and really have no place being performed on a public beach in the town of Nantucket.
Thank you, Greg. Raymond DaCosta.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so first I'd like to thank everyone who spoke so far. Just a couple quick things here in opposition to Carrie's statements. First off, Greg Scommel was in her letter there saying that it is bad for these sharks. Greg Scommel for 20 years caught these sharks, mainly brown sharks, off the backside of Martha's Vineyard. He tagged them in a study. No sharks that he knows of died. The sharks that we've caught here in Nantucket have been recaptured as far as the Gulf of Mexico. It's a very long way to swim, especially for a shark that's supposedly injured. I personally don't think the town should really allow anything to pass here for this. There's no real danger to the public in my eye, whether we chum or not. These great white sharks migrate here for one reason alone. It's to hunt these seals that are all through our coastal waters, thanks to the Marine Mammal Act. In my questioning here, just want to know from the board standpoint, are any of the board members concerned with the recreational fishing for brown sharks, sand tigers, or duskies from the beaches, or is this all for the, purpose of stopping a great white attack?
This was something that was brought to us as a request, but for me, I would say that that it's very, very much the use of chum and the potential to attract a great white where people are swimming and surfing. I'm not sure about the rest of the board. Matt Christy are agreeing with that statement, and Jason. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I just want to say that I do understand the concerns of the board. We definitely, have a lot of great whites between here and the upper end of Cape Cod. However, all the known documentation and photos and videos I've seen of great white sharks around the island are in two spots, one being Great Point and one being Nantucket. There's a reason that we see these sharks in just these areas alone. It's because the seals are there. So if the town really wants to go forward and pass this law, I don't see how the town's not going to go and pass a law to open up all of our beaches, including Great Point, to move these seals away from our beaches, get them out to sea, push them to the islands that are less inhabited, beaches that are less inhabited, because that's what's really driving these sharks up the coast here. The way this argument was originally written, which I understand it's been, changed now, and I applaud you for at least doing that, you would have been prohibiting scup fishing from Brant Point. Like, that's not going to help anything here. This literally to me seems like there are a couple people who don't like the way shark fishing looks from the beaches of Nantucket and are trying any way they can to shut it down. So, I mean, there's no real danger here, in my personal opinion. As you can hear from Austin, there's never been a great white caught from a beach that he knows of. So I just, strongly urge the board to just leave this alone. Our beaches have been safe forever. There's never been an incident on Nantucket. These sharks live around us. As Bob said, it's very important for these scientists to have the data that we're collecting with tagging these sharks and understanding their migration habits, especially for the brown shark that was decimated in the finning days. It also allows the community to get a better understanding of our waters, showing them what is really in the waters that they swim, giving them that actual realization so they have the respect when they go into the water. So I thank the board for its consideration.
No, thank you very much. I mean, I just want to say that I have no intention of doing any regulation that limits the ability for people to do whatever type of recreational fishing they want to do. But I do understand the idea behind this is the use of things like chum that could attract a great white. But next is Sam Brandt.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to say thank you to you guys for changing a lot of the wording. I think there was an immediate outcry in the community. I think it was, and I was, a part of that. I think it was extremely vague. So I just want to applaud everyone for starting to change some of the things. But I want to talk about a couple of things, one of which is just clarifying some of the organizations and what they support. I actually work with the Shark Research Institute, SRI. It's based in my hometown of Princeton, New Jersey. I work hand in hand with them very frequently and have done a lot of projects. And so to go back on one of the things that Bob DaCosta was talking about in Florida in regards to what the government has in terms of that, I know from working with SRI that everything that was done in Florida was ran directly through FWC, which is the Florida Wildlife Commission. And down there, they worked hand in hand and everything had to be approved by FWC. And there were actually several towns that tried to do what Nantucket is doing right now, specifically Normandy Beach in Southern Florida, that the FWC declined. And I think it's kind of odd because, everyone here can tell you, I fish for sharks myself all the time. I don't need chum to catch a shark. And there's no one here that I know of that's using chum. And I think that It's also important to understand chum in that it's not an on and off switch. I think the public doesn't really understand that, which is understandable. You know, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of stuff in the fishing community that goes into that. And I actually wanted to read something really quickly from Robert Huter, who is actually the director of the Center for Shark Research, the Mote Marine Laboratory, which I've worked at before. And in conclusion of an article he wrote in 2012 following a shark attack that happened around the Horn of Africa with a white shark, concluded in saying that unless chumming is done on a constant and regular basis with a large amount of chum in the same area, chumming will not condition sharks to alter their natural behavior over the long term. There are cases where some onshore facilities, such as restaurants or processing plants, have released animal material into the sea on a regular basis, which has led sharks to learning where and when the potential food is released and aggregating in the area. That is more of a case, though, of the sharks associating area and time rather than humans per se with food. And I think that's really important because just because you're chumming doesn't mean that you're going to have, you know, you could swim directly in the slick of a chum and you may not have any species of shark even take a second glance at you. It's very difficult to turn that into something that's going to be dangerous. You know, the only place that ever really happens is in the Bahamas, that people have talked about, where there's shark diving happening, where they are feeding the sharks on an active bait on a regular basis, seeing people handing food. And usually what happens is that food isn't presented at a certain time period and the sharks become aggressive. And this article is actually public. It's by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. It's by Mary Bates, a PhD, as well as Robert Huter. And I think it's really important. It's a really important article, and it gives a lot of clarity on this topic, because not only I just don't believe that this is something that Nantucket should really be touching. It's not something that's a problem. You know, I think if there were dozens of people every day chumming, then yeah, that would be a problem. I mean, but it's just from the science that we have, chum is not a direct link to any kind of aggressive behavior. And even if we were attracting sharks, you know, this is by no means a number, but I can tell you that probably most likely very heavy majority are going to be sandbar and brown sharks, like we've talked about, which through the SRRS database, we know have accumulated for 6 total shark attacks in the last 400 years. So that's a very small amount of correlation, and even less correlation with the idea that chum somehow creates aggressive behavior. So yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to say, is just kind of adding some more science on top of everything that everyone's talked about. I just want to thank the board for changing a lot of the things that in the wording. I think it's important that we protect Nantucket's one of their largest resources, which is the fishing industry, and all of us who really enjoy it and who are promoting the research and conservation of sharks through fishing. And I think that this is a needless step that's just going to create more complications down the road for something that isn't really that large of an issue. So thank you.
Elliot Sudal.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. Hey, just from a standpoint of someone who fishes here a lot and on Nantucket, and I've actually tagged over 600 sharks here for various research organizations over the years. Chumming is not a thing. No one's chumming, regardless of what this act says. It's not a necessary step. And if you think about how this all works, like the waves would push the chum in any way, you'd have to kayak it out. It would be a whole ridiculous process. It's really just not something necessary in the whole process of catching, tagging, and releasing a shark. And it just seems like this is a pretty crazy regulation over people that are catching and releasing sharks. These are protected species. These guys, I mean, the people that are doing it, and there's a lot of interest, and a lot of the people that do it are great at what they do, and they catch, tag, and release, and we learn a lot about where these sharks go. It's just overall, I mean, I just want to say that the woman who wrote that letter, was following me around for years, taking photos, and I had to go to the police a lot of times dealing with her in particular. But regardless, I just don't think it's an issue. I mean, no one's ever been killed by a shark on Nantucket, or really bit by a shark. No one's been bit or killed by a shark on Nantucket. Yet this whole thing is, to protect the beaches. And I just sort of don't think it's a necessary regulation. Like, regardless, yeah, no one's chumming. I mean, you cool, get rid of that, great. But just no one's doing it. It's just kind of a, it's a really cool fishery, and no one's keeping these sharks. And if you do it right, there's so much data on catch and release with satellite tags and this and that. I mean, they live and they survive the process if you do it right. And I get, after hearing this, that this is not a direct attack on beach fishermen or whatsoever, but it's just overall, my 2 cents that I just want to throw in is that no one's really chumming. That's not a thing. People don't do that. And thank you for your consideration with all this.
Elliot, thank you. Just to clarify, that letter was asked to be read into the record. That was not the view of the board and is really not something that people need to keep refuting. It was just another public comment. Jeff, can you go back to talking a little bit about the complaints that were received that sort of brought this up? Because I mean, tonight we're hearing a lot from people that this isn't really an issue.
Sure, and if I may, I mean, I think a number of the comments also came into town administration for complaints about the beach, and some of the folks in public safety. And again, some of it related to probably, I mean, none of them are really happening or current complaints that are going out and actively investigated right at the time. It's usually something where something's sent in afterwards, and by the time we either have staff that gets there, something people are gone. Or in a few of the cases, sometimes it's people that are just actively fishing and there's no issues or there's no problems. Again, I think it was related more towards the general concern that's been discussed a lot tonight about the public safety aspect of, sharks in swimmable areas and how to minimize that risk to the swimming public that's there, and was kind of the genesis of that. Again, and then we were asked to put together what a regulation would look like for this, and that's what we have in front of you. And obviously, like we've said, we want to make sure that we are accomplishing our public safety goal, but still also protecting the ability for people to fish and fish correctly. And I would agree 100% that most of the folks are doing everything by the book and correctly, and are 99% of the time not an issue. So. That was kind of the genesis. If anyone else has anything they want to add from a direct complaint that they took in or something, that would be totally fine as well.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to go to, we've got a couple more people, and then I think that we'll try to bring this to an end for tonight. Brian Doherty.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brian. I'm located on Long Island, and I come up to Nantucket a handful of times in the summertime to fish. And when I heard about this hearing, I wanted to just come and just emphasize the point that everyone else has made so far. Most of us, when we go to the beach and we fish, we chuck out a piece of bait, and usually if we catch any shark at all, it would be a sandbar shark. I've never had great white shark on or even close enough to bite the bait. They do come in close, but they've been there for hundreds of years. But there's no correlation between chucking a piece of bluefish out in the water and a great white going for that type of bait. There's an increase in the seal population, and that's why we're seeing more great whites and more seals as well. So I think this is kind of a ridiculous thing to bring forward, but if it would make the people who brought this up feel better, you can write about how there shouldn't be any chum or things like that, because we're not doing that anyway. But I think there definitely needs to be a clear distinction between fishing for sharks off the beach and chumming. That wording has to be very specific, because people will complain if they have the slightest opportunity to. And I think it's like Elliot and a lot of people here tag the sharks, and sometimes he even brings kids out for their school project, and it's a great way to interact with the ocean and show a love for the environment. And all this research that we're doing is definitely helping way more than everyone that does this really cares for the environment here in Nantucket and just wants the sharks to thrive. And I just wanted to make that point tonight. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Kevin Ramos.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Great, thanks. I just wanted to touch up something real quick. What Bob DeCosta said in the beginning. I'm a fisherman and I pay a saltwater Massachusetts license. I was wondering if the town had any ability to tell me set my regulations on a state law already. With that being said, I know we're learning a lot with COVID laws, what we're doing different from the state, and I was wondering about fishery as well. And then another real quick thing is property lines. We know the town owns a lot of these beaches where we drive on the 40th and the sewer beds and Nobody Beach. But if we walk 50 feet off the property line of the town and we have that high water line that is private property, but if I'm out a Little Neck Way shark fishing for a lemon shark or a sandbar shark, are we going to be having the summer residents calling the police that we are fishing and chumming off a chunk bait, what people keep calling chumming? These are a chunk bait, as many people prior to myself talking to this, not understanding what chumming really is. So I just kind of wanted to say that and see if the town could do, you guys turn around and go against our fishing licenses of the state. That's about it. Thanks for letting me talk.
Does anybody want to respond to that? The difference between town and state?
Madam
Greg?
Chair, through you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so there is a distinction between regulation at the town and the state level. Yes, the state issues licenses that authorize fishermen to fish either commercial to fish for various types of species. However, they do not authorize the use of town-owned property for that purpose. Rather, the regulation of town-owned property is something that is within the province of the town. And so, as I've said several times during this call, this is not a regulation of fishing. This is a regulation concerning the use of town-owned land. And the regulation is very limited in scope to a prohibition on using town-owned land for only certain types of activities that attract sharks that are not legitimate fishing activities. And in my opinion, the clarifying sentence added to the end of the regulation makes that abundantly clear. And so it's my opinion that there is no conflict between this regulation and the issuance of state licenses that authorize fishing.
Christy?
Thank you. The previous question just reminded me that we got a public comment that I didn't know if you wanted me to read. It came in just after 5 o'clock. It was from David Neva, and he had two questions. One was, how would this not go directly against Massachusetts general statutes that the immediate coastline is held in the public trust for fishing, fouling, or navigation, which I think was just answered. And number two, what has the Coastal Zone Management Office said with regards to this proposal?
Jeff?
So I'll touch on coastal zone management. Coastal zone management doesn't deal with the regulation of fisheries or use of the beach in this fashion. That topic would solely be covered by the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Thank you. We've got a couple more comments. Let's just try to keep it to anything, any new thoughts, if you don't mind. Tyler Moore. Oh, Tyler, did he put his hand down? Raymond DaCosta?
I did put his hand down, but I let him in.
Oh, he disappeared. Maybe he didn't. Well, he might come back. Raymond DaCosta? Just anything new to add?
Yeah, just one quick thing. In reading this memo that the town has out, does it who's going to be able to enforce this if this does go through? The language in this makes it sound like it's pretty much any town official can enforce this. And also it says designated or to attract or that might attract any shark species into a swimmable area. Any shark species is pretty vague. But I'm just trying to see who can enforce this if this goes through.
Jeff?
So currently all of the beach regulations are listed to be enforceable by any member of the Nantucket Police or any other designee of the select board. In past years, that's included, the beach manager or some of those staff. So if the select board designated someone in addition to the police, they would be able to enforce these regulations.
Carl Boyce?
Hello.
Hi,
Carl
Carl.
Boyd here. Great discussion. Thanks for everybody's input. I just, one thing I want to point out, and I also want to thank everybody for putting their 2 cents in. I'm in support of not changing anything, keeping it as is. But I also like to ask, if we put this in place for town beaches, am I correct in stating that if we stand in the water below the low water mark, we can continue fishing with these practices anyways? As far as state law goes, once you step there, it's no longer a town-owned beach. Am I correct in that?
Who would like to provide the answer on that? Greg?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, the town beach extends to the boundary of the waters of the Commonwealth, and so the town has the regulatory authority of the entirety of the beach that is within the boundaries of the town of Nantucket.
So you're stating the 3 mile line? Because any private beach owner, you can fish on their beach if you're below the low water average mean.
Madam Chair, through you, this is
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
this is not a regulation of a private beach. This is a regulation of a town beach. And at a certain point, the beach becomes the ocean, and so it's no longer a topic of conversation because it's not the beach anymore; it's the water.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carl. We keep having hands raised and it's 7:48. We do have a number of additional things on our agenda. I'd like to make a suggestion that we continue this public hearing to a date certain and take some of what we've heard already under consideration and schedule another date to continue the conversation. Jeff?
Yeah, just to wrap up, I think that's a great idea. I think if we make those language changes, and then again, I think if people have questions or concerns, they can feel free to contact our office with some thoughts, and I think we're happy to incorporate those. Again, our goal is to get something that's workable and manageable for all of the parties involved. And we're happy to kind of hear them out and try to make some revisions or changes to make it workable. And if it turns out that nothing needs to happen, then nothing needs to happen, or we can get something that gets on the books that really is clear and takes away the ambiguity. So we're happy to work on that for whenever you want to schedule it again.
Yeah, that would be great, Jeff. I'd like to give this some further work and thought because I'm starting to wonder if some of it's like some unfound complaining that maybe doesn't necessitate this, but I'd like to get to the bottom of that a little bit more. Christy?
Thank you. I'm happy to continue this, and just a couple of questions just for Jeff and Greg to consider while they're reworking it. I was a little bit concerned by that first sentence as somebody that doesn't fish or shark. Kind of reading the first sentence makes it seem like you can't do the rod fishing for sharks, and so just make sure that's cleared up. And then we heard from several that chumming isn't really an issue on the island. So I'm just kind of wondering if this is necessary. So just things to think about before it goes to the next public hearing. But I'm happy to make that motion to continue this. I don't know if Erica wants to give us a date.
Yeah, we'll have to pick a date certain. I'm thinking that we should push this into January if that's okay with everybody. What do you guys think about, say, January 13th?
I'll make that motion to
How-
continue to January 13th.
How full are we for January 13th? I know the 20th is the night we're supposed to adopt the warrant, but that actually might get altered.
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. We have budget presentations for the enterprise funds for fiscal 22, some Q2, fiscal 21 Q2 budget reviews for a couple of departments, and review of warrant articles, possibly a PFAS special counsel retainer presentation so far.
Okay, so we'll just, we can always alter it again, but we always have to continue a public hearing to a date certain. Christy, you're good with that motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call. Matt Fee?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. I know that there are currently 5 of you with your hands up that we didn't get to tonight. Please feel free to write in any comments to all of us, any one of us, to Jeff at Natural Resources, and we will definitely continue this conversation. Plan on January 13th, and again, feel free to write into us or reach out to us in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to have to move on to the next item on the agenda.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. We do have another public hearing to determine tax allocation by classification, percentage of residential exemption to be granted for fiscal year 2021. I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't know if there's any initial comments. We do have a couple of hands up. I'm actually just going to go to them to see if they're still related to the sharks before we move on. Bob DaCosta.
I lowered my hand. I'm sorry.
Okay, hands are lowered. Just wanted to make sure we were good from the last part. Rob or Brian, do you want to introduce?
Rob is going to take you through the recommendation right now.
Okay, well, as you all know, annually we have a tax rate hearing to officially set the tax rate and to set the percentage of the residential exemption, as well as the shift in the tax rates from residential portion of the tax burden to also the commercial side as well. We don't, because of some COVID issues and some other things, we don't have some final numbers for you tonight. So we would like to continue the hearing to next week. In the meantime, perhaps you think about some alternatives, if you have some alternatives to what the current or what we had last year as far as residential exemption rate, which was a 25%. And that's 25% of the average residential value, which last year came out to about roughly $530,000 off of the assessed value of a property. One of the, if we tinker with that too much, one of the issues that we run into is that we have a lot of properties, about 150 of them or so, that the value is low enough that we have to manually calculate when you subtract the exemption, what that means for the tax burden on that particular parcel. So it's a little bit of extra work for us, but we've done it in the past and we will do it again this year if we need to. one other thing to consider going forward is that this year we've seen a huge spike in real estate sales, which aren't going to show up until fiscal 22. So if we change much with what we're doing as far as percentage and the shift, we might have to change it again. I mean, I'm guessing next year, because we're going to start to see the what happens when this spike in real estate sales starts to affect values next year. So it's up to you all how you want to handle this. But if you have ideas other than keeping it the way it's been, you should let us know, and we can present what that might look like.
Thank you. I know that there's been some talk in the past about changing the shift in regard to commercial, and this year businesses have been hit harder than ever before. But we have done that once before during my tenure. I'm sure it's been done other times. We generally do generally need to start that process earlier with something that earlier today. And if it's something that the board is interested in pursuing, so whether it's a change to the residential exemption or a change to the shift on the commercial end, it's probably something we should schedule for like September or October of next year to get ahead of it in the proper time frame. And it might coincide better with realizing what happened this year with all of the real estate sales. But this is a public hearing. Board members, feel free to raise your hands. Anyone in the public who wishes to speak on it, please do so. I have not seen a hand yet. Matt?
Yeah, no, we've talked that we go over this pretty much every year. There was talk of maximizing the residential exemption a number of years ago. I don't think that wasn't necessary at the time. I'm not certain it is now. I think that the exemption number, the average sale is going to go up, and the exemption number is going to be slightly higher. I think that's fine. I think the concern would be commercial, but I wouldn't, make it even. If we were going to change it, I would change it, 5% or so. Last time when we did it, we changed it slightly, and it was a small increase and imperceptible to anyone else. If we did anything, it would just be a slight tweak, would be my recommendation.
Does anybody else have any thoughts? Christine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in support of looking at how to change it for next year if we wanted to start that process in September or October. But there isn't anything this year that I'd be interested in seeing before next week.
Jason?
Yeah, same here. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it as it is right now.
Matt?
Yeah, I think the reason we look at it is, at least that I support looking at it, is that, we always people work off our rate is low, aren't we lucky? Well, our rate isn't low if you own a business and you have employee housing and you have multiple other, you don't just have a residential exemption. Now, a lot of those businesses have been really hurt this year, and they don't have, some people have done well, but a lot haven't. They don't have the ability necessarily to pay. So they are, some are property rich and cash poor. Based on what we've been through, that is why I think it's worth looking at. But again, I wouldn't do anything extreme. If we wait till next year, that's fine as well. But I would love to see just what a slight shift would do.
Would there be time to put a chart like that together, or is it something that we should wait until next fall for?
At this point, I would suggest waiting on that, but I can certainly put something together at that point that, sort of what the different options look like. As to Matt's point, slight variations don't make a huge difference. So, I mean, that's not a big deal for us. But sometimes there are unintended consequences, but that's up to you all. I mean, I think the point to remember is that there is one pot of money that we're raising through taxes, and it's the way we're splitting it up has been working for the last couple of years. And if you're reducing the burden on one class, you're increasing it on another. So you're sort of taking from one side and adding to the other. And that's just up to you all how you want to handle that. I mean, if you're comfortable the way it is, then we're good, and we'll just continue doing what we're doing.
Jason?
I think it was my first year on the board when we went from, correct me if I'm wrong, 20 to 25% on the residential exemption. And then at the same time, there was a little bit of a change into out of commercial, the shift. Is that right, Matt and Brian?
Yeah, that is correct. We did go, I think it was a few years ago, we went from 20 to 25%, and there was a small change, I think, from 1.75 to 1.70, I think, when we did that. I think we did make a small change.
Yep.
Just a kind of a quick clarification. We'll put together some charts for if we continue this to next Wednesday, that are typically what it is now, what that would look like, and what very small incremental changes would look like, so that the board could see that. The thing that I would recommend in talking to the assessor is that we not really change too much right now the residential exemption when we do this, and look more long-term about how that gets done. But we can put together, certainly, we know what it is for the shift is this year. We can put that together once the state finalizes some of the values that we're waiting for from them to complete this. And we can put together a couple just small incremental changes so everybody could see what it would look like if we made those, so that when you make this determination, you have at least looked at a couple different scenarios.
Okay, great. Maybe we can go to a motion to continue to next week.
I'll make that motion. Second.
All those in favor by roll call: Matt Fee,
Aye.
Jason Bridges,
Aye.
Christy Parentella, Don Holgate, aye. Thank you so much. Town managers report. 2021 ATM.
Okay, so this is outline number 3. You have been discussing warrant articles since mid October-ish. And I just want to go over where we are. What I've been trying to do is highlight items that are new or different from your prior update. So there's not too much new in this category of annual articles. The category of other select board sponsored articles, we have a couple things. The Land Bank has requested withdrawing an article that was carried over from the 2020 annual town meeting. Article 30 had to do with financing. So I don't know that the board would object to that, but they intend to not carry that over. And they'd like to withdraw it. And it was sponsored by the board. So I think that can just be withdrawn one time if you so agree.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just make a note. So moving down a bit, other financial potential articles. I've included this notation here about establishing a special stabilization fund for a portion of the room occupancy tax proceeds. Brian and I have talked a bit about this, and we do have a bit of concern as to establishing a dedicated fund. Like it would most likely need to be a special stabilization fund unless we were going to consider some kind of special legislation. We need to determine what these funds would be for, and we would need to determine how we are going to allocate a portion of the room occupancy tax proceeds into it. We also have a concern that even now we have not seen a full normal year of the room occupancy tax as it has been expanded with the short-term rental tax. So we would recommend holding off on that. Also, it would continue to take a town meeting vote to appropriate funds out of any kind of a special stabilization fund.
Can I just make a quick comment on that? I mean, I would ultimately like to see some funding source with a portion of these funds that goes towards the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, so that because we've been unsuccessful in some of our other endeavors, to give them a permanent funding source. But I don't want it to be a stabilization fund, because a stabilization fund then requires a vote of town meeting, which takes away the ability for them to react and compete in the real estate market for properties. So I'm not sure how we could get at that. But I mean, I know that we still have not seen a complete non-COVID year. And actually rentals were we probably saw some less tax revenue this year, even though the island did end up being somewhat occupied because people were doing longer stays that didn't have the tax applied to them, because they didn't have to go back to work, except remotely. But I know we've talked about some other things like roadway infrastructure, harbor cleanup, with the additional funds that we're going to realize from this tax. And hopefully we continue to realize those funds from this tax.
We also need to establish kind of a baseline, because we've already, we're already working in some of these for the operating budget. And some of what has been talked about to use these funds for is going into the operating budget for those purposes. So we can certainly explore how to use some of these funds for, say, the Affordable Housing Trust on an annual basis. Brian, you and I can mull that over, I guess.
We also talked about the year-round bus service.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe it is just a budgeting in of a continued commitment to fund the trust fund. Jason?
I agree with you, Dawn. All those options that you said fall right in line with our strategic plan. And when we originally talked about this in the previous board, we were trying to figure out stabilization fund, and like you said, but it really was housing and infrastructure was, to my recollection, was the two main areas that are impacted the most by short-term rentals. So it makes sense to, how are we to do it? It's 25 or 50%, maybe a percentage is easier in our budgeting to go to housing for sure.
Yeah, it's Matt here. It could be a percentage. Maybe it's a policy, and we set the percent and we look at it yearly, and not lock it up in a stabilization fund, but lock it up by sort of board vote and direction, and then go from there.
Yeah, the stabilization fund doesn't really work for housing. I don't believe. But anyway, we can move on to the next thing.
Okay, so we can continue working on something, even if it's a policy. Okay. Zoning bylaw and general amendments. Harbor Place is a potential. I think we have maybe talked about this a little bit previously. It's a project that's underway with some discussions with the property owners, the owners group. None of that property of Harbor Place is owned by the town currently, and we have some different discussions going on about possible acquisition by the town of some of it or not. We appropriated, as you all know, $150,000 at the 2020 annual town meeting to conduct a review and a conceptual review of transportation improvements there that the town would like to see and what it would take. So that is all underway now. It's not exactly close to being concluded. And whether or not we'd be ready for something to go to town meeting remains unknown right at this exact moment. I don't know if Matt or Dawn wants to add to that, because you guys have been involved in the discussions a little bit.
I would just say that we're working diligently to try and have something ready that would be paired with the development agreement.
Yeah, so it would be potentially a zoning article, but the idea would be that it wouldn't go forward to town meeting without a development agreement that had been agreed on between the board, the developers group, and input from the planning board. Okay, general bylaws. I had on here previously potential for approval of expansion of the SBPF erosion control project. That was tentative, and that would most likely have been a citizen petition, which was not received. So I've just drawn a line through that for now. Limitation or licensing of commercial events at private residences. This has come up for potential board consideration. As I think you know, there has been a neighbor issue in the Tom Nevers area as to commercial events occurring at a private residence. It was brought to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The ZBA upheld the zoning decision, the building commissioner's decision not to issue a zoning violation. And it remains to be seen what other additional legal action might occur. But if the town wants to regulate commercial events at private residences, there is a non-zoning way to do that. I don't have anything written up about it, but I've very preliminarily spoken with town council about it. So it may be something, if the board is wanting to address that situation, that we could look at, but we would need to get going on it sooner rather than later. And it's almost too late at this point, but maybe not totally. But I don't know if you want to pursue it or not.
Does anybody have thoughts on pursuing a non-zoning limitation on events at residences? And what that might look like? Jason?
I'm kind of on the fence. If I lived next to a place that was doing it every weekend for 10 weeks, I'd be all over it. How would we implement it? Who would Plus be enforcing that? Like how, I kind of think through the whole picture, and we could do it, and then it would be really hard to enforce it.
It would most likely be a licensing issue. Not necessarily done through Plus, but with some assistance from time to time as to what activities are going on, maybe. I can try to get a little more information about how it would exactly work.
It's probably good to ask some more questions about it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's good, I think, to think about. I don't know if we have enough time for this year. Just the unintended consequences, right? Thinking about, really talking to event planners, talking to neighborhood associations, civic league, that getting that kind of feedback.
Just jotting down some notes. Okay.
Okay, next one.
All right, next, dogs, question mark. There's been on and off discussion about dogs, primarily at the beach, whether or not they should be allowed, whether or not they should be leashed, when, that sort of thing. And I think most recently when the board discussed it, there was some talk of, when we're discussing warrant articles, let's consider it at that time.
Christy?
Was there also an issue with what we were able to assign a fee for breaking the guidance? Is that why we wanted to go to town meeting?
Assign a fee?
Yeah, I
we
thought
wanted to increase.
Alter the fee structure for dog-related violations.
Oh.
That was more of, I'm personally not interested in initiating a warrant article for any kind of limitations on where dogs can be, but I was supportive of the idea of having different levels of fines for real egregious dog violations.
Okay, so perhaps at this point, take a look at the fine schedule.
And what we can legally do.
Okay.
Greg Corbo, I think, had brought that up during the last dog hearing that we had.
Got it.
Yeah, and my take on it is we should enforce the leash law in the summertime. I mean, it's a issue on the beaches. People, people think everyone thinks their dog is the cutest ever. It's not very cute when it's eating someone's sandwich or peeing on their chair at the beach or on their towel. It's not very cute, and that's the stuff that is happening constantly. It was okay, 20 years ago with fewer people. It's not okay now. And I think that's the issue. How do we get it that we need to have the sort of the gumption to begin to address it. And I think that would go a long way. So I'm not sure it's a town meeting vote because everyone will show up and say, I love my dog. But I think we need to have the gumption to start saying, some of these things are not acceptable.
It does get a little tricky with leash law at the beach because a lot of the beaches are private or, not necessarily public, not owned by the town, in other words. So at town-owned beaches where there are lifeguards, the lifeguards are pretty good about telling people they have to put their dog on a leash. But if you're at another beach that doesn't have a lifeguard and it's not town-owned, it gets pretty tricky. And I totally agree with you, Matt. A lot of those things are not at all cute. Okay, well, for there's that out there. And for now, I'll take a look at the fine structure and speak with town council about that. The airport is requesting an potential amendment to chapter 58 of the town code relating to rental cars. And essentially what they seem to be proposing is to remove the cap. There is currently a cap on the number of rental cars that can be rented of 700, I believe it is, or thereabouts. And it is a little difficult because early on each rental vehicle has what's called a rental vehicle medallion. And if you don't have to necessarily use them. So people kind of maybe have hoarded them a little bit and don't get rid of them. Or
how many more do they want?
They do not want a cap.
Oh, I'm sorry. They want no cap. Okay. But they would still decide who gets how many or no?
I think they want to eliminate the issue of caps and rental medallions entirely. We haven't had a chance to fully, determine sort of like unintended consequences of that internally. I think they want a little more freedom to be able to rent space at the airport to rental vehicle companies. And that's really difficult right now because the medallions are held by only a few companies and there aren't any available. So they really can't rent space to anybody at the moment that doesn't already have the medallions.
It's Matt again. This is way more complicated. And I think any of us that have traveled to other places and have seen the sort of the way the cars are treated and the rental cars are treated, it's part of your package. And then you go to the airport and you get in line and you get in your rental car and you drive to your hotel and you park your car and you didn't really even need it. And then you bring it back and it's huge operations. And it's great probably for the airports and great for the car companies, but not great for traffic on those islands. I had this experience in Hawaii. I've had it down in Florida. I think that we have to be very careful. We put that in the 90s to address an issue that was happening. Now, I think that we'd have to spend a lot more time looking at what the impact of that will be and figuring out, one of the arguments is, the market will take care of it. What the market will do is the market won't take care of it. We'll just end up with even more. And I just think, and we're in that, Old South Road, it's bad now. I can't imagine if we set up an operation with 2,000 or 3,000 cars and how do we get them over on the boats? We've already had issues with people not able to get, to be able to get on the boat, get a reservation for their car because it's packed with rental cars at one point. So I just think that there's a lot to this that that I don't see how we'd be ready to understand it and address it properly and fairly. There are issues like Turo, the car sharing that is out here now. You know, that, do they have medallions? Probably not. They found a way around it. There's a whole bunch of things, you know, there are a lot of rabbit holes we would end up climbing down if we tried to do this properly. I just don't see how we can do it in time.
Jason, then Kristen.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. This is really complicated. I've talked to Amy Baxter about this and moped rentals and everything for years, just trying to figure out how, you know, is there a way to move forward and make it better? Not exactly what the airport's asking. And then Turo has really gotten hot the last couple of years. You beat me to the punch there, Matt. And until the state comes down and says, yeah, places like Turo have to have, you know, licenses, and it's a way for a lot of, you know, year-rounders to pay for their cars, you know, in the summer. And so it's a rental income, almost like renting your house. So thinking about those type of kind of, you know, the Turos of the world, how that fits in everything, and what else we don't know. I think it's complicated, but is it something for 2021 to put on a priority list, but not this ATM?
Christy?
Thank you. Just thinking about kind of the regulation on this, and then when Matt and Jason brought up Turo, you know, I think we kind of lost out on an opportunity when we were really restrictive with taxis, and then Uber came in and kind of destroyed that market. I'm just thinking that Turo's doing that same thing. So, you know, we have a chance to kind of get ahead of that. And by loosening this restriction, we might actually help reduce that burden. I also saw a comment today about reducing the amount of people that bring their cars over to the island if they're able to rent. I know that the car rentals, the prices are insane, and that's because of the limited supply. So this could be something that actually helps, you know, reduce the amount of people that are bringing their cars over to the island and larger SUVs on the island in the summer. So I think it is something that I would like to see us tackle. I think Jason made a good point. Is it, you know, necessary for this town meeting? Maybe not, but I would hope that we at least start this conversation to maybe put on 2022 annual town meeting.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Christy, that I think that we should have increased taxi licenses. I think that it is probably not the wise decision to completely take this restriction away, but maybe there's some middle ground. The price of rental cars is really ridiculous what they're at here because of the demand. And I do wonder if people might come out and only rent a car for a couple of days, maybe rent a Jeep with the day that they want to drive out to Great Point or something, rather than having a car for the whole week, doing that shuffle of trying to get on and off the island on Saturday. And I could see some potential benefits that could come along with increasing this, and, you know, and potential revenue for the airport to keep them going. They certainly have parking available for some additional cars, but maybe it's something like going from 700 to 1,000, not just going from 700 to unlimited. But I'm not sure what the exact right thing is.
And again, this is tough to talk about. We don't have traffic modeling done. We're adding, you know, 2 point something cars for every house that we're building. They're not necessarily in that driveway, but they're on the island. And if we bump this up to 1,000, I guarantee we'd have 300 more in year one. And so, you know, we'd have a 500 car increase. You know, can we, you know, what's our carrying capacity for vehicles? Can we handle that? You know, we don't have a transportation planner to even look at that for us. I mean, I just think that we are out of our depth. You know, we'll hear one argument one way and another argument the other way, and we'll pick something in the middle, but we could be really messing up. And, you know, so, and I don't think it would slow down the people coming over. A lot of the people coming over are bringing their cars so they can bring everything to the house. You know, they want to get on the boat in their car and drop it at the house, especially with what's going on today. And so I just think we can wait a year on this And then, hopefully we'll have a transportation planner with a ability to traffic model, and we'll really actually be able to get our head around this a little bit, would be my suggestion.
Christine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just add that, I think if we went from something like 700 to 1,000, I don't think it's adding 300 more vehicles. I would be really interested in seeing if the airport could compile the data of how many medallions are actually in use by the car rental agencies. I'm not sure if they're willing to share that, but I know with 700 medallions, there might be maybe 400 cars that are actually being utilized, and the medallions are just being held to prevent competition. So, I know it might add a couple more cars, but I don't think that it would go up to having 1,000 cars on the road.
The other point you made, Christy, that I thought was interesting was maybe we could tie them to being smaller vehicles. Because a lot of people do tend to travel here with very large cars that are full of stuff, and maybe it would attract people to fly in, rent a car for part of their stay, and buy more groceries and things locally. So, I think that there could be some positives. Mary Longacre has her hand up.
Thank you, Don. Sort of the opposite of Christie's point. If these are rental car companies, it's highly likely that those cars will arrive in the spring and leave in the fall, which means they'll be taking spots on the steamship. So I would suggest that you coordinate any changes in the number of cars permitted to rental companies with the steamship authority and get their input on how that will affect the ability of islanders to travel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. It's a good point. Brooke Moore?
Is there a way to change the regulation on the medallions that if you don't use it, you lose it?
Maybe. I think that these are good questions to pose to the airport to come back to us with more information on. I think that that they want us to propose this. There should be a little bit more research done on a number of these questions. Matt?
Yeah, but this is the 700 car limit is not an airport. That's a town. That was done by the town. So, they'll come back with what with something from their perspective, but we need to look at it from a overall town perspective. And I agree, I agree with the, you don't use it, you lose it, and there are a lot of questions that who's monitoring, who counts them, how often are they counted? I think a lot of that, if we dig into the details and get some of that, then we could have an informed discussion.
I think Amy can tell it. She keeps close track of who has what medallions. She could probably easily provide that, but I'll jot all this down for additional info for the airport and go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Back up a little bit to some non-yellow items, Erica, in the outline. Earlier items under the bylaws. I do at some point need the board to determine about paid parking and whether or not the outcome of Article 66 is going to impact that. So all of the items that, at some point I need to go through these one by one and have you tell me on, off, or whatever. Yeah, not necessarily tonight, but just warning you.
It's Matt again, the Historical Commission. I think that their article, you're not recommending it. I understand that. I think that there is some validity to what they're talking about and to including them in that discussion. Maybe it's town meeting. They've got an article that they proposed that's going to be at town meeting. Maybe we could have them come and meet prior and find if we can solve it without going to town meeting with it. But I think that they've done a lot of work that should be considered.
Yes, thank you for that, Matt. Don and I spoke about this earlier today, and I think we agreed that we should have some additional discussion about what could be done without a town meeting vote or without an amendment to the bylaw. Perhaps it's a board policy or some kind of recommendation when there are sidewalk or road improvement projects and the type of material that's used for curbing and the other items that are listed in their proposal.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out if there was a way, and I've talked to Hillary about this too, and we're going to talk again. I just haven't had time over the last couple of days, but of figuring out a way that's not as cumbersome as having to take something to town meeting. I mean, that's become even more heightened with COVID and not being able to have a town meeting right away. We're still not sure how we're going to have our upcoming town meeting. We're now talking about a potential early June date and having it outside. So just wondering if there's a way to alleviate the concerns and get the input from the Historical Commission that's necessary without it being a need to fully go to town meeting with every roadway project.
Okay, home rule petitions is the next category. And there's really nothing new there. I don't know of any other home rule petitions that we would be putting forward at this point. Real estate related, we've gone through these previously. Some of these are carried over from the June town meeting. And we've had a discussion with the land bank about a potential land exchange, nobody or playing fields for Mill Hill Park, that's under review. And then there's the list of the citizen articles that were carried over. There's a list of ballot questions we are going to need to know at some point from the board, which of those you want to put on or not. And government study, non-binding questions, that's kind of a different situation, but some follow up at some point on those. And then the citizen articles. So 22 were carried over from the June town meeting, 25 were submitted, and there's a link to them right there. And I sort of try to break down the categories of them: 7 zoning, 7 real estate, 4 bylaw, etc. And I'm also trying to total up right now of all of the citizen articles that might call for an appropriation. What does that total? That's typically not included in our budget recommendations. So, but I want to get a sense of how much we're talking about. And I know that pending out there is a potential call for a special town meeting within the annual town meeting. And I know, Brooke, you're working on that. And town council can take a look at the language for that if that is going to proceed, maybe before it's submitted. And lastly, as Dawn referenced, we did have an internal meeting yesterday about whether or not we think we're ready to have an indoor town meeting in April. Christy was attended. I see Sarah's on, and she was there as well, along with the town clerk. And long story short, there are a lot of logistical issues either way. We had the electronic voting person from Option Technologies on with us. And he was telling us that a lot of towns are struggling with this right now. And most of them haven't really made a decision. Some are saying, let's wait for the vaccine, see how it goes. Some are saying, we can't wait for that. We just need to make a plan. And some are just not dealing with it at all. I'm trying to conduct a little poll of Cape and Vineyard towns to see what they're doing. And I think the way we basically left it was the town clerk's working on a kind of a framework to evaluate both indoor and outdoor, and when, and what the various issues are with each option. And then we would intend to make a recommendation to you. Yesterday, I was thinking maybe we could do that before the end of the year. And today I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to get to that before the end of the year. If we want to have electronic voting, though, we will need to pick a date soon. If it's not the date we already established, April 5th. So it can't be too much further than after the end of the year, like the first or second week meeting in January. So there you have it. We talked pretty extensively about if we have it outdoors, having it in cars, outside of cars, and all the various issues that are associated. You wouldn't think that it would be that hard, but there were many, many issues raised with both of them. And we think that actually the non-in-car outdoor option might be looking better than an indoor option, but that would mean we have to do it later in the year, like potentially early to mid-June. Sarah or Christy, do either one of you want to add to that?
Yeah, Christy.
Thank you. Just to kind of pose it to the board, I think one of the biggest kind of questions that the subcommittee had is it important to have town meeting before the election? And can we delay, both of them till June? Or what's the preference of the board this year? It was a concern that we wouldn't be able to have an outdoor meeting until June because of weather. And so kind of what we're trying to figure out, like, what's the most important priority? Is that, trying to have it in April and figuring out how to do an indoor option with multiple locations, or being able to wait until June? So just something to think about.
I do think it's important to have the town meeting discussion before we have the ballot questions. I think that's the ideal way of doing it, even though we didn't do it this past year, but obviously we tabled things that we wouldn't have. Matt, you had your camera off.
Yeah, we get, we call it January for a reason. It is not, we've been lucky the last couple of years, if I remember correctly, but sometimes we aren't. And, I know that because my business suffers when it's crappy all June. So that's just, we should keep that, front and center of our thoughts. Early June may not be so great. Second, third week of June, we're looking, it's a little better. Just a couple other comments on the land bank swap idea. I think that's great, but we need to make sure the valuations are equal and we are, doing our job as a board, and not be in a situation where we vote on something at town meeting and then we have to do it. I want to make sure that we've done our sort of legwork initially and upfront as opposed to later. I'm also looking forward to getting a lot of the zoning stuff prior in, so we have time to look at those. I look forward to seeing their analysis and the impacts so that we have a chance to actually look at those. I think that's been a very good idea this year.
It seems to me that the date that was floated earlier of June 5th with the election on June 15th was feasible. I don't foresee that we're going to have the big weekends this spring because this virus is not going to be gone to the extent where we'll be able to have large weekend gatherings, I don't think, and maybe in some abridged form. But I would think early June would be okay. And it gives us some more time to work on some things. Jason?
I like the early June, just from a, restaurant, coffee shop standpoint. Those first 2 weeks are really bad. I mean, it's the slowest part of the summer. You get that really big hit Memorial Day weekend, normally on a busy summer. And those first 2 weeks are just, you got staff and there's nothing really to do. And so I like that from that standpoint. It's not, we're not bursting at the seams on those 2 weeks. So as of now, I like those dates. You said the 5th and the 15th?
Yep. And it would be a Saturday. June 5th is a Saturday.
Yeah, if we're going to have it outside, it's got to be during the day. Sarah, do you have any thoughts? I know you sat here through our whole meeting.
I did, but I was here for the conservation restriction really, and then I thought I'd stay for town meeting. I think a June meeting makes sense, and June 5 and 15 seems to make the most sense. I just don't picture us doing an indoor meeting in April. It's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, well, it's sort of, we should make this an actual agenda item, but it sort of is sounding like there is a general consensus for doing this in June outdoors. And so why don't I try to work out any issues that we might see immediately with that, which I can't think of off the top of my head, but I want to confirm with the town clerk that those dates work, and with the electronic voting guy that those dates work. Yesterday, he said the June 5th date would work, I think. Christy and Sarah's did. Is that what you guys remember? Yeah.
That's right.
And
And
town
June-
council too.
June 12th is out because it's graduation, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I need to confirm with the school too, that that's going to work. The place we were initially talking about would be the parking lot off First Way. I mean, there are a lot of issues with things like power, sound, technology. This, by the way, we would not, most likely, we would not have a projection screen. So we're going to have to go back to the old fashioned way of doing things, where people need to have their warrants and listen very carefully to the moderator when there are amendments. And we won't see them projected on a screen, but we would have electronic voting.
Will we have, if it rains, do we have a tent?
We would have a tent. Either way, we'd have a tent. It won't have sides. But we have to, get all that stuff lined up like now. Chairs.
Can we do it at where the drive-in is and use that screen?
We don't think that is big enough. Plus, if it's going to be on chairs, people need somewhere to park, and it's kind of tricky over there. So, okay, we'll start working on this, and I can get back to you with any change from that.
Yeah, I just briefly to go back to paid parking. For one board member, I'm not really interested in instituting anything this coming season. That's where I am. Christy?
I'm kind of feeling that way too. If we're going to have a lot of impacts of COVID in this upcoming season, and I'm not sure if we'll have the staff capacity. I think it's worth collecting the data for another year. We have the technology, but I'm not so sure that I think it's worth putting forward right now.
I agree. I think we would be, it wouldn't be very effective, finding staff, like you said, Christy, capacity. You don't have a transportation planner. We wouldn't have, if it's a parking commissioner or whatever it is, we don't have that set up. And there's a lot of question marks for this next year. So I agree, putting it on hold for a while.
And Matt, I'm fine putting it on hold, but I hope that we need to put this into place sort of next winter. When we snap out of this, all the issues we had before are going to come back, and they're going to come back even worse. We've added 500 cars since then. It's going to be a different, it's going to be more intense, and unless all the real estate agents are going to work from home forever, which they're all going to be back. Don's smiling. They're all going to be back, and we're going to have to figure. We're going to be under a lot of pressure again. And so we've had a little bit of a break last year from it, but we should take advantage of the slight break we've had to take care of it.
Okay, so I think that's Christy, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring it up, but I'm not sure if everybody's aware that Brookmore had put in a citizen warrant article to create a funding source for the Affordable Housing Trust through the land bank fee. And it didn't, ended up not having enough signatures. And Libby mentioned that's why Brookmore is interested in doing a special town meeting, which would be held on the same date to ease this. But I just wanted to present it to the board to start thinking about if the select board would be interested in sponsoring that article to first, support affordable housing, but also to prevent the special town meeting. So I don't think I needed an answer today, but just wanted to float that by everybody.
I'm happy to provide an answer for how I feel about it. The initiative is something that's been talked about for a number of years in regard to the land bank funding, but it's not something that I'm interested in supporting as the board until the land bank and the trust fund were to come to some agreement that it's the right thing for the community from both of their perspectives in terms of how it's drafted. And hopefully if it's a special town meeting, we can run the dates in such a way that we can coincide it and do the special on the same day as the annual. But I also would like us to continue that discussion in terms of a commitment for funding out of the short-term rental tax, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Matt?
Yeah, no, I have spoken to a couple members about this, sort of asked, would we support it? We were missing by one. We only needed one more person and we would have been on the town meeting. And I said, this is the third rail. This is not, I wouldn't support it at this point. I think that we're going to need a lot of the funding that goes to the land bank now is going to be needed for resiliency and acquisition. And we're going to be 20 or 30 years from now, we're going to look and say, thank God we had the land bank for those reasons. They're working on it now. And, I support the, housing. I support the article that's up there now. And I think that maybe we can carve out, or we are going to carve out some of the other, money we talked about earlier tonight. But I think that they were fortunate it didn't get on town meeting. I think this is an overreach that, might put housing back a little bit, might hurt them a little bit publicly. So I think, I wouldn't support putting it on. And I think it's a mistake to try to get enough signatures to put it on, because I think it's an overreach that will hurt them, not help them. So.
Okay, are there any committee reports? It's 8:47 and we have a 9 a.m. executive.
You didn't do your meeting schedule for 2021.
Oh, sorry. Can we approve the meeting schedule for 2021? Does anybody have any questions, comments, or changes? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
All those in favor by roll call. Matt Fee?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
John Holgate, aye. Thank you, Erica, for reminding me on that. I skipped ahead. But are there any brief committee reports? Christy?
Just a quick update from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The RFP that was issued a couple weeks ago, there found to be some discrepancies, and we actually couldn't accept, we had 4 that were submitted and we couldn't accept 3 of them. So we've decided to reject all of the bids and redo an RFP. So when those come back, I'll give another update to the board, but just so that you're aware, with the Neighborhood First funds, the RFPs have been rejected.
Thank you. Anybody else? Or I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call. Matt Fee?
Aye.
Jason Bridges?
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella?
Aye.
Don Holgate, aye. Thank you all very much. See you in the morning.
Thank you.